Senate will come to order. Chair recognizes Senator Huffman for a motion on a committee substitute for House Bill 500.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, at this time, I move to reconsider the vote by which the committee substitute for House Bill 500 finally passed. Members, there were a handful of items that were inadvertently left out of the conference committee report. The conference committee to Senate Bill 1 is now at the printer, and therefore it would be more efficient to amend the supplemental bill. I move to reconsider.
Is there any objection? Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is adopted. Chair lays out on third reading. House Bill 500, committee substitute for House Bill 500. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 500 relating to making supplemental appropriations and reductions in appropriations.
Following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 on third reading by Huffman.
Senator Huffman, you're recognized.
Thank you, members. This amendment adds a few funding items in higher ed and for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, again, that were inadvertently left out of the CCR to Senate Bill 1 and now be included in the supplemental appropriation. I move adoption.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 1? Is there any objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Senator Huffman for a motion.
Move final passage of committee substitute House Bill 500.
Senator Huffman moves final passage. Committee substitute for House Bill 500. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The bill is finally passed.
Thank you, members.
Senator Menendez, we're going to do the teacup now, so don't leave. Senator Perry, you're recognized on committee substitute for House Bill 46, on the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. House Bill 46 is the Texas Compassionate Use Program, or better known as TCUP. House Bill 46 will do several things. It will add an additional 9 licenses, making a total of 12 licenses by amendment. It also increased dosage from 10 milligrams from the current to 10 milligrams per dosage per uses. It allows prescriptions up to a maximum of 90 days and a maximum of 4 refills. I do have several floor amendments that will make those changes known, as well as a few other things. We did add effectively 2 different eligible conditions for TCUP. First one being terminal or hospice, or people that are terminal or people that are on hospice. And secondly, we did expand it to include chronic pain as described by Texas Medical Board. So that is the basic changes to the TCUP program as it came over from the House. It is a significant expansion from the existing TCUP, or Texas Compassionate Use Program. So with that, I move to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute House Bill 46.
Senator Menendez, what purpose?
Questions of the author, Mr. President?
Do you yield?
I yield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chairman Perry. First of all, Chairman Perry, thank you for carrying this bill, and I want to thank you and the President for the hard work on the expansion of the TCUP bill. Some folks think it's just an expansion in terms of the operations, because I think the number of licenses have gone to 12. Is that what you laid out?
With the amendment, it'll go from the current 3 to additional 9, making 12 total licenses, plus satellite offices that were not available before for each of those 9 locations. So hopefully across the state, the idea is you will have access by distribution centers in those regions. So it should be deployed regionally, should hopefully get those up and running pretty quick. We've got 3 existing, so get those satellite offices, and then the other 9 offices should be up and running within a year.
So those 12, are those 12 operators, different operators, or how many operators? Because I'm just curious about competition, because one of the complaints has been the cost of the product. And as you well know, you've worked hard to get rid of the products that we don't know what's in them, and replace them with these products that are going to be medically available, organically grown. We know exactly where they're coming from. They're grown here in Texas. People have observed them. They're under close watch, and so that whether it's a patient that's taking it for PTSD or for MS or chronic, some chronic pain, that they'll know what they're getting. They're not going to have the fear of possibly having some other products they're not looking to get.
But you hit the nail on the head. It's quality control.
Yeah.
Quality control and control of a intoxicating or psychotropic substance, right? So it's no different than any other drug in that respect. So having those 9, we believe that will expand enough manufacturing and distribution to get it out to where it needs to be.
So that should help with the pricing.
It should, supply and demand. You increase the supply, it should lower the cost. And the new distribution centers under those satellites, because currently a large part of the cost of delivery of the medical cannabis was the actual distribution point. This will alleviate a lot of the cost because they'll be able to store it in those locations and be able to distribute it. Right now, currently, if you need it and you live in Lubbock, the manufacturer / retailer, if you will, has to bring it to you from Austin.
Yep.
And if you're not there to pick it up, you get to take it back. So that's a large part of the cost of this product, is just getting it to the persons that are needing it.
Makes a lot of sense. One of the other concerns is that people who are dealing with chronic pain, they're concerned that it's been too difficult to either qualify or to get it. And so you've told me that chronic pain now is the definition. Which is the definition you said it was going to be?
So the chronic pain definition in here, because we had to have kind of a stake in the ground. What is chronic pain according to the medical industry? And I got multiple versions. They all centered around a 90-day window where you had a pain you couldn't get rid of. So the distinction is acute pain versus chronic, right?
Right.
Acute is if I smash my finger with a hammer, that's pretty acute,
Right.
but it's not going to last 90 days.
Right.
The acute is something that normal practices can't alleviate the pain for more than 90 days. So in the medical board's definition, they had it litigated, board rules, a lot of things that finally came up with a definition that basically says if you have had an opioid prescribed anywhere in your past for an affliction that's still giving you chronic pain of more than 90 days, then you would be eligible to come into the program. And it lists a whole lot of things there that are acute. And it says if this didn't fix your acutes,
Right.
but you had an event that you're continuing to have pain after that, and you know, I use the analogy, maybe my knee surgery in the 90s, really painful. I don't know what they gave me. I think they did give me some opiate or morphine or something for a while.
Right.
But that's 2 days, right? So that was acute for those 2 days. But at that point, I had been prescribed some type of an opiate. I would be eligible to use it if my knee was chronic pain today.
Well, that's the good news because you read it at first, it seems as if because it talks about a prescription for narcotics or opioids, that maybe we were saying you had to take and we don't want to force anyone to take narcotics. As a matter of fact, we're trying to help people keep them from taking narcotics, from getting addicted, from possibly overdosing. And so you are telling me, and I've spoken to a different doctor as well, that guarantee me that this definition will not force anybody in order to qualify for the teacup to have to take any opioids or narcotics first.
Correct. It's based on the theory that if you've had an opioid prescribed in the past,
Yes.
then you must have had extremely painful chronic type pain instance.
Right.
And if that affliction still afflicts you today, you would qualify because you had been prescribed an opiate. Theory is when you get an opiate, that's the highest level of pain you can get in our bodies, right? That's the only medical science they have. So the medical board threaded that needle. We're using their definitions. That's their standard. If that standard changes in the future for better things known today that are known tomorrow that we don't, it will reflect those changes. But we didn't have this legislative definition. There's already a medical definition, and we've tied it to that.
Well, I really appreciate it because the two of those combine, the 12 locations with the satellites, being able to store on site with the
10 milligrams.
Pardon me, 10 milligrams.
10 milligrams dose.
All of these things together do signify a true expansion, in particular the chronic pain definition, because at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that people have a product that they know is safe and that will actually be used directed by a physician to help them with pain. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I have been working on medical cannabis legislation since probably 2017. And I have a lot of reasons for that, but I won't bore y'all with them tonight. But I want to thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Charles Perry, for answering my question.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gutierrez, what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield for a few
You
questions?
yield.
I will.
Senator Perry, thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. President, for your work on this. I know you were surprised with my early position on this, that we were on the same page, knowing that I have been for a regulated recreational, regulated medicinal, but I want to thank you for your work, and I'm going to get to why. Senator Perry, we for years had created this teacup program. Is that not correct?
That is correct. I think it's 215, I believe.
And I want to apologize, Senator Perry and Mr. President. I think that we need to have this discussion so that people out in the public know why we needed to do this and spell this out in a real way. When you laid out your bill on SB3, you were very clear about it, but I want to just break this down. We created teacup some time ago, and year after year, we have opened a platform that was a regulated medical platform, correct?
That's correct. It began in 2015, and since its inception, it began as an epilepsy. Those that remember, there was, I believe it was Charlotte's Web, a girl named Charlotte out of Colorado that was having seizures every 15 minutes of the day. and they were able to strike a balance with some cannabinoid stuff that she stopped having seizures. She lived a very productive life. She got COVID, unfortunately, and passed away, but that stopped her seizures, and that's where this whole cannabinoid stuff started up. But it started with epilepsy. Since then, we've added seizure disorders, multiple sclerosis, spasticity, lateral sclerosis, autism, cancer, incurable neurodegenerative disease, post-traumatic stress disorder, a medical condition that is under for a research program. Now we've got terminal and hospice, and we've also got chronic pain per the Texas Medical Board's description.
That story about that little girl, Senator Perry, led me to investigate cannabis many, many years ago. There was a woman named Michelle Walker, whose husband was in the military in Corpus Christi, and their son was having 3,000 seizures a month. I then created a documentary called LegalizeTexas.com as I continued to investigate what this did for people like that and for veterans.
Mr. President, too much chatter. I can't.
Members, Senator Perry can't hear. He can't hear.
Too much
Can we
background.
cut down all conversation, please, on the floor?
It's important.
Senator Swertner, Senator Creighton, they can't hear. There's just too many pockets of conversations going on. Thank you.
This is important because then we went off and created this other platform, another pathway, when we legalized hemp. And you saw those evils of that.
Yeah.
Why don't you speak to that a little bit?
Let's speak a little bit about that. I didn't create another platform for THC. I created, per the Farm Agricultural Code, a market for hemp production that was meant to build construction products, other materials, clothing. It was a universal answer to a lot of the things we find that we need in construction. It was very tight. It was an agricultural bill only. It was 0.3% THC is the limit in it. The plant, it regulated the plant. It put production parameters around what that plant could do or look like. From that, in the hearings, when I was laying out the 2019 agricultural bill, I reminded people that if it gets wonky, as it did, and they do silly stuff that they did that has caused irreparable harm to many people, we would close it down. They didn't believe me. 21, I filed a bill to close them down. 23, I filed a bill to close them down. We are now successful of closing them down. But let's be clear, the agricultural bill did not legalize the production of THC products through synthesized Delta 8, Delta 10, pick the flavor, the flower, etc. So it took what was a good thing and has ruined the agriculture sector. We thought we'd have a robust agriculture sector building houses out of hemp. What we got is a consumable market that really just took it and ran with it in a way that was not good for people, and they ruined the hemp market. There's 174 acres of hemp production in Texas today for agriculture, and that's what they did to it, and that's what I told them they were doing to it. You're ruining the ag market because you're mixed up with all these consumables. That said, Senate Bill 3 left CBD and CBG on the shelves. That is beneficial. That helps you sleep, it helps inflammatory, it is things that are not intoxicating, not psychotropic. So we didn't wipe away the things that we said you could do. They just got really greedy and a lot of money in selling very, very dangerous stuff. And that's why we had 3. This is a follow-up to expand the legitimate use under doctor prescribed so that everybody knows what they're getting. It's very quality controlled. We're expanding the locations so the supply should increase to where the cost goes down. We're changing the distribution so where the cost will go down. So we have answered what we believe the market needs as far as people seeking use of it. But anytime someone says we expanded THC in that consumable market with 219 Ag Bill, that's just blatantly false.
That's right. So, and you and I might, the end goal of what we want might be different. I might want a regulated medical or a regulated recreational use, but at the end of the day, that first word is important, regulated. What we got in the second pathway, as you just suggested earlier, was a deregulated, recreational, synthetic maybe, THC maybe, CBD maybe, aluminum, other metals, where an 18-year-old kid, hell, a 16-year-old kid could go into the 7-Eleven and pick up a vape pen with no regulation whatsoever. And I didn't want that, and you didn't want that, and I dare say nobody in this room wanted that. Is that fair?
That's correct. And those products, psychosis, paranoia, schizophrenia, in short order with addictions to follow. It has ruined many, many lives.
And so we're going back to the first path today, which is a regulated medical platform. And maybe one day we get to where I want to be, but that first word is so important because at the end of the day, it's still a drug. And for anybody on the other side of the building or over here that has any qualms about this, we have to regulate drugs. And there's no damn way in the world that we should let some little kid go in and buy. And so that's why the president and you and many others in this room sought to do what we're doing. Now I want to switch to what we're doing.
Okay?
If you go see that documentary, you'll see a guy named David Bass. I don't know if you've ever met him. I think the president's met him. David Bass is an Army veteran, captain. He looks like a guy out of Duck Dynasty. He's my friend, and I love him.
I know him well.
And you know David well. And when I did that documentary, there was no teacup. And David was one of the first patients on teacup. And he'll tell you, well, first off, his story was this. He went to Iraq. The VA put him on opioids. They got him hooked on opioids. They ruined his life. And the only relief he was able to find was illegal cannabis. And then we created Teacup. And David swears by Teacup. And he was one of not hundreds, but thousands of veterans that were hooked on opioids by the VA. And they found relief in cannabis. And that's why we created it. And David is the biggest success story that I've ever seen on this issue because he leads a life now where he's not constrained. Cannabis can be a very good medicinal product when done in the right way under doctor regulation and so on. But I urge people to understand what we're doing today and the vitalness of what we're doing today. There's no way in the world that we should be letting little kids have access to this stuff. Senator, Chairman, the last thing I want to talk about, you covered this very quickly with Senator Menendez, and I want to just be just as expeditious about it. Chronic pain, the expansion into chronic pain, should get just about every veteran on disability, likely, you and I aren't doctors, but likely every veteran should be able to get in to Teacup. Is that a fair anecdotal statement we could make?
I would say it's a fair anecdotal. I think chronic pain is a really wide berth, but I do think it captures the bulk of market, veteran and non, that show that they have a pain that has lasted more than 90 days, and it's not an acute issue, it's just constant. So in that medical board definition, it's pretty clear what it isn't. It also says what it is. So I don't think we have to wonder what we were thinking. The TMB's already done that for us.
And here's the part where you and I will differ. I hope that every state that has done recreational, regulated cannabis has only seen a 1% uptick in use. And they've created a product where you go into a store, you show your ID, you got to be 21, everything is weighed, everything is measured. If you go into that same documentary, you'll see me in a lab in Colorado, and you'll see the most incredible setup you've ever seen. When something gets dropped on the floor, they don't throw it away. They have to go weigh it. Then they have to put it in a special incinerator and destroy it. Everything is tagged and labeled appropriately. It is the most incredible thing you've ever seen, and we're starting to do that. We did that with Teacup. One day we might get to that other phase, but right now we're going to save some kids' lives. We're doing this the right way because we don't know what ingredients they're putting in this. So I think that this is an incredible bill. I think the expansion of Teacup is incredible. I appreciate everything you've done in your efforts on this, but I think that the public really needs to know. I read an article this morning about some farmers that were very upset. They need to understand that what happened was never our intent. You called it, and many other of us called it. And one day, maybe we'll get where they want to be. But right now, we're going to expand a regulated medical market, and that's it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Secretary will call the roll on suspension. Any objection? Hearing none. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out. Committee substitute for House Bill 46. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 46 relating to the medical use of low THC cannabis. You're going to be a yes on the bill.
Following amendment, Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Perry.
Senator Perry, on your amendment.
Yeah, Mr. President and members, we wanted to kind of know who's owning these companies to the best of our ability. So what this amendment does is it says more than 10% of a dispensing organization, if owned by a publicly traded or private held corporation, would want to know those folks are getting fingerprinted, or a governing officer, or as those defined in Business Code 1002 Business Code, which is basically partners that are limited liability companies, sole proprietors, et cetera. So we just want to know who are owning these companies by fingerprinting them.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. Following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 by Perry.
Senator Perry, on your amendment.
This is the one I spoke to earlier, members. We currently have 3 licensures in Texas. Actually, one of them is only really actively working, but in this amendment, we're going from 3 to 12, so an additional 9 locations or 9 licensures will be made available.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. The following amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 3 by Perry.
Senator Perry,
Yeah, members, this one is just saying that basically we should give preference to Texas companies for the most part, but not required to have them all as a principal base of Texas. Comparative application, evaluation application, initial licenses dispensing under this. So basically, we're trying to focus, as much as possible, getting those 12 licensures in place. We've got 3. The plus 9 would be Texas-based if possible.
Any objection? Hearing none? Oh, Senator Menendez,
Thank
forgive
you,
me,
Mr.
hold on.
President. No, not an objection, a question on the amendment.
Do you yield? Do you
I
yield,
yield.
Senator?
Thank you, Senator Perry. Does this have to do with the applicants? Because I was concerned that you and I had a conversation that over 100 people had applied. Some are, leasing space and all of these things. And so are you touching on who gets to the ability to go into the system? We're not starting over, are we?
No, so I have an amendment number 6 that clarifies 3 of the additional 6 will be from the existing applicants.
Okay.
The other 3, subject to DPS. They may look at the 150 and they can go there. I think they're going to need to just from time.
Right.
I think if I was smart, I'd look at the 150 and not take another 10,000 applications in and have to go through them. But we're not restricting all of them because 3 out of the existing 150 with the last 3 being at the discretion of the DPS. So I think you'll see the bulk of them come out of that just by necessity, timing of going through them.
Yeah.
But we opened it up after the first 3 are picked by DPS from the existing applicants.
I have questions about the timing of the additional licenses, but I'll reserve those for that amendment. Thank you.
And but that's what it does. It's going to say you get 3 out of the first pool that's already existing, you open it up, but you can still take the next 3 from that original pool.
This is just a sort of a preferential treatment on
Right.
licenses.
This is Texas-based companies if possible.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Any objection? Hearing none? Amendment is adopted. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 4 by Perry.
You're recognized on your amendment.
Members, this is the chronic pain description per the Texas Medical Board, so we're defining what chronic pain is and adding it into the eligible issues or eligible diseases or afflictions. But that is straight out from the medical board today.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. The following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 5 by Perry.
Members, this was an amendment requested by the governor's office to make sure that they don't have to prescribe a full 90-day. They can prescribe up to. So they go up to a 90, but they don't have to go up to the full 90. So it gives the flexibility from 1 day to 90 days. It's just clarifying that's a possible.
Senator Menendez?
Quick question, Mr. President.
I yield.
Thank you. This is an important amendment because originally when you had 90 days, it read as if you had to get the full 90 days, could be very expensive. And we all know insurance won't cover this, so people would have to come out of pocket. So now you can provide 3 refills up to 90-day supply, so someone could come in and say, look, I can only afford a month's supply.
Right.
All right, thank you.
And the doctor controls that. If you need it reduced or you don't need it, then that process is working. The good thing about this is doctors are going to be engaged in your medical care.
Yes.
And we're not going to self-medicate through whatever vehicle, be it the gas station,
Right.
the grocery store. And so this is going to be the appropriate use for medical treatment going forward.
But this amendment addresses one of the issues that we can't have a program. It won't really be accessible unless it's also somewhat affordable.
Right.
So it's a good amendment. Thank you for the amendment. Thank you, Mr.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. The following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 6 by Perry.
Members, this is the amendment I spoke to a while ago. Currently, there's about 150 applications that were put in place in 23, and then applications were closed. Though we're still setting at DPS, and there has been significant investment and some work done on those 150, whether they still exist or want to be in there, we believe it's only right that those get a look, or a different look, if you will, without going to a new market. So what this amendment does, it says it requires 3 of the next 9 or the next 6 applicants to be licensed by October 1 of 25. So that gives the DPS the opportunity to go to that list, look at them, and try to find 3 out of that by October 1, 25, and then the remaining, if they open it up and find people they want to go to, they've got till April of 26. Again, I think just the volume of new applicants to expect it would be difficult to go through. I don't want to put this on DPS, they're required, but I think they'll see the logic if they can get their 6 and the existing applicants, they probably will.
Senator Menendez?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, if the author would yield that.
I yield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. Yes, I had a similar amendment. I was concerned about how long it would take DPS to add. If we're really talking about an expansion, it won't mean anything unless it happens pretty quickly. So I really like the October 1st for the next three.
Yeah, so assuming the other 2 that are kind of inactive right now get back in, and they're required to or they lose their license. If the 2 that are kind of dormant don't get back in the game, they'll be out, so that'll open up 2 new slots. But assuming those 3 current providers get going, they find the other 3, I would envision the current 3 would have their satellite locations moving pretty quick, right? They're already working. So the next 3 that come in by October 1, so we'd have satellites locations when they're being approved in that process. So hopefully we'll get this thing rolling as soon as possible. But having the original 3 with new satellites, the other 3 new ones out of that list by October 1, 25, that's pretty short. Yeah. I mean, between now and October 1.
Is the bill going to allow for them to have on-site storage, not like they do now?
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any objection? The amendment is adopted. The following amendment. Obviously, this was a bill built on amendments. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 7 by Perry.
Senator Creighton.
Senator Perry on your amendment.
Yeah, Mr. President and members, this was another governor's suggestion. They took the adopt by October 1 and said propose because that is a pretty short order. We know what the rules are probably going to be from existing applicants and what we were in place. Probably aren't going to require a lot of tweak, but we didn't want to box them in to the point that they may not make that deadline and then we have a challenge.
Senator Menendez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Quick question. What is the part of down here at the bottom? The Executive Commissioner of the Health and Human Services shall propose. So this is actually looks like an improvement. You're adding Health and Human Services to the operations of the plan. Is that
correct?
Yeah, that's a definite improvement. Because I mean, I feel like DPS has enough on its hands and their enforcement.
Do. HHSC is already a licensure in so many levels that does some of this. Yeah. You've got DISHs already involved in actually some of the retail side of this conversation. So we'll have a holistic look going forward.
That's a good improvement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. You are recognized, Senator Perry, to
move past third reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. You're recognized. Bill passed the third reading. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Wardwell.
31 ayes, no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for House Bill 46. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 46 relating to the medical use of low THC cannabis.
Move final passage.
I think we have a few people who want to speak on final. Senator Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief, Mr. President. But I think that this is important. Again, we need to reiterate it because we got so many calls. This body has always made a commitment to our veterans. When I tell you the names of these veterans, it's because they've allowed me to utilize their names. When they went into the field of battle in Iraq and Afghanistan, the VA's only solution for them was opioids. Brian Ortega was in the U.S. Army. He went to Iraq and Afghanistan. He's on 100% disability. I knew the medication I was on was going to kill me. I felt like a slave to it. He was given hydrocodone along with other opioids. He dreaded waking up in the morning. He moved to Colorado to save his own life. Crystal Beatty, U.S. Army specialist as well as the Air Force. Twice, she joined 2 different branches of service of government. Moved to Colorado to save her life off of the opioids that the VA put her on. Major David Bass, U.S. Army veteran that many of us know, a great hero, went to Iraq, came back, and was placed on opioids. Saved his life through the consumption of cannabis, and now is one of the leading proponents of Teacup, a great program. That is our commitment to our veterans. Grant Weidman, in a 14-day span, he had only 12 hours of sleep because of the opioids and the hydrocodone he had been put on. Michelle Walker had to take her little boy to Colorado to save his life, where he was prescribed cannabis oil. We still need to get there so that Michelle Walker and her veteran husband didn't have to leave Texas, so that they can come back to visit their relatives. And we'll get there. We'll do what's right to help people. But we also have a commitment to our kids. And our kids, our commitment to our children is to keep them safe from a narcotic that they shouldn't do probably until they're 25 if they chose to do it in a regulated market or in a medical setting if needed. And reasonable minds will differ on this floor. But no way and under no certain terms did we ever intend for some kid to go to the convenience store and pick up a vape pen. Not anyone in this building ever, not once, wanted what happened to happen in Texas. And so you had to grab the reins of a pretty strong horse, of an industry that had gone down the road, unfettered and unregulated. And we all had to do that. And we got a lot of grief for it. But we never authorized it in the first place. Now maybe one day we'll get to where I want to be, or maybe we'll stay where we are. But the most important term there is that we will regulate this industry in a right way so that we can continue to help the commitment that we have to our veterans, because there will be other battles and there will be other theaters of war, and we'll get there. And when they come home, we'll give them a product that is less addictive than the hydrocodone, that doesn't cause them to have suicidal tendencies, that doesn't have them walking around like zombies, that frees them of their pain under a regulated setting. But we will continue the commitment to our children. And that's why this bill is so important. And Senator Perry, I appreciate all the work that you've done. I want people out there to know the truth about how we got here, where we've been, and where we're going. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Senator Gutierrez. I firmly believe if the industries that were out there doing what they were doing on the retail market had invested the resources into this technology, I firmly believe there are benefits yet not known. But until they get out of the short-term gain that creates tons of pain, this product's never going to move forward in the market. But it has potential, but it needs to be followed the path of all of our drugs and pharmaceuticals that go through. Love them or hate them, we have a system that puts good drugs on the market for people to use. And if they would just focus on that, they'd be making more money long-term, but it's all about short-term gain. And that's what's wrong with our country. It's about the buck today, no worrying what the problem is. I want to say thank you for Mr. President.
You have one more speaker. Yeah. Senator Menendez,
okay.
You recognize on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank also our president, because he's been working on this personally, individually, and I reminded him this morning about a conversation when he called me about this that we'd had in 2015, our first terms, his as lieutenant governor, mine as a senator, and he asked me about what was one of my priorities, what did I want to work on, and I mentioned medical cannabis. And the reason that I did is because so many times when we talk about the conditions that patients can qualify for our teacup, whether it's epilepsy, a seizure disorder, or multiple sclerosis, spasticity, ALS, autism, cancer, PTSD, that a lot of these situations are not theoretical. They're lived experiences. And, I haven't asked for permission, so I'm not going to share the name, but this person in particular has had 2 back fusions, has hardware in her back, has had fentanyl patches prescribed by a doctor, that if you touch that fentanyl patch for a couple of seconds, you feel woozy. You feel like you might pass out. Dilaudid, hydromorphone. And all of these narcotics create all sorts of havoc with your body. It's no wonder that we heard from Senator Gutierrez that these veterans wanted to take their lives because you can't think straight. Sometimes you don't have an appetite. When you do eat, your body doesn't process your food correctly. And this program, in talking to a very respected pain specialist in San Antonio, I said to him, I said, hey, how are the patients doing? He says, we're having a shortage of medicines. The pharmacies are all giving them trouble about prior authorizations. They can't get what they need. And if you saw his practice, most of the people in the room were senior citizens, were elderly. And he said, if y'all gave us access to cannabis, I could get most of my patients off narcotics, and they'd have a better quality of life. I texted with him today. When I texted you, we were talking about the definition of chronic pain. And he said in his messages, you do have to put something in there so that people don't abuse it, and I think you've got the definition. I have advocated for the last 10 years for a medical cannabis program, and I said this to the president. I said, this is the only medical therapy where we as legislators, for some reason, think that we know more than the doctors. Dr. Schwartner went to school for a long time. Dr. Campbell went to school for a long time. Dr. Schwartner is a pharmacist in addition to being a surgeon. They know how drugs interact. They know what's prescribed, and they know for a fact that narcotics are 100 times worse for us than cannabis. So when we pass this bill, and this bill goes on, and I hope it gets signed by the governor, and if these folks, and if DPS takes this seriously and we expand it so that every health region in the state actually has this, and that's one of the amendments I wanted to have that I think you covered, though, that before we let these dispensaries put 2 or 3 in Dallas or Houston or San Antonio, that every health region has to have one. Because every part of Texas has veterans, has elderly, has people who are hurting. And it wouldn't be right that they just go to the biggest markets. At the end of the day, because this is really, when done right, it's just another medical therapy. It should be a doctor, the patient, and a pharmaceutical outlet. But fine, we're going to do it this way. This is fine. Let's move forward. Thank you for the amendments you brought forward. I had 5 of them, and I had one, and I know Senator Gutierrez had one too that would have been a little more expansive, but we want to make sure that this works for everybody. At the end of the day, public policy needs to be what's in the best interest of all. And at the end of the day, they'll know what they're getting, because a lot of our constituents have been self-medicating. And for years, people have self-medicated with alcohol, with nicotine, and now with THC. And so hopefully, if this gets up and running quickly, people will have an opportunity to have a benefit or something that actually works, so that in the very real example I was giving y'all, when that person was able to take medical cannabis instead of narcotics, that person was able to tell me, I don't have pain, and I can think straight. So because they can actually formulate these things to where it's not so much THC that you're not getting stoned. And just for everybody here, if you're worried about people getting stoned, those folks are going to do it with or without a law. They don't care about what law we pass. What we're doing by keeping people from having a law that they can operate, we're keeping those people who respect the law. So thank you. I look forward to voting for this and co-sponsoring this legislation. And Mr. President, thank you for creating a real expansion. I know you've been hesitant. I know you've had concerns. I know you don't want Texas to ever be California, and it won't. Because Texans are not, they're different. And we're still here, and we get to make the rules. And at the end of the day, what we're just trying to do is help people live without pain. And every pain specialist will say the best thing to treat nerve pain, neuropathy, neuropathic pain is cannabis, THC. And so I want to just say thank you. It's a good day. It's a good night. It's been a rough session, but this is something that I personally feel very good about, and I want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator. And Senator Gutierrez and Menendez, you both worked with us together today. I appreciate Chairman Oliverson over there with his help on this, and Senator Perry, of course. You know, what we've done, members, this session, and maybe we didn't see it when we came in, but we are eradicating bad actors who are poisoning our community, children and adults, and making a massive profit off the backs of people in pain and people who have gotten hooked on THC and some very terrible outcomes. And we've wiped them out, and now we're building the biggest compassionate use program probably launch in the country, because it really is a launch, because we only have one operator right now, and his business went down by 90% because of the illegal or questionable products on the street. So it's a good 1-2 combination, and I thank everybody for working together and making this
Mr. President,
work.
it takes a leader to get somewhere, and you were very cautiously and responsibly the last few years as we expanded eligible afflictions, and with the mess that was created from the other groups that forced our hand, and you responded appropriately, and I appreciate that. And I think most people, you can't please everybody, but I think the majority of people that need and deserve the treatment are going to have access for it. It's, you know, I think we did the right thing here tonight.
In a safe, regulated way for
So
people in
with that, I
treatment.
move final pass to committee substitute House Bill 46.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
31 ayes and no nays. Bills finally passed. Thank you, Senator, for all your work on this. Members, I know it's late. I know everybody's tired. I know everyone's talking as other bills pass, but if we can have some quiet on the floor so we can continue our work. Senator Creighton recognized on House Bill 126 to suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, a couple of nights ago, we had this legislation, the name, image, and likeness for college sports legislation, brought up on the Senate floor. That bill was this legislation was ultimately pulled down because it became very apparent that many of your offices had not been approached by the university systems on name, image, and likeness settlements that were coming forward very soon, and court proceedings that will ultimately lead towards an order that will reflect the terms of the NIL settlement, but it will be in the fall. And because that final order on NIL settlements that are already in place will not be issued by a judge until the fall, we are considering this legislation to make sure after session that we're in compliance with that settlement. So members, because many of your offices did not have an approach by universities or their teams to make sure that everyone was up to speed on the current urgent nature of this legislation, to make sure that we are a part of the NCAA settlement for NIL, I wanted to cover in my layout once more exactly what the general terms are that we should be expecting in the fall when it is signed as a final order. As you know, members, we've had NIL in Texas, name, image, and likeness for college athletes since 2021. And each session since 2021, we've made small adjustments. But one thing that has been resolute in our Texas law for name, image, and likeness is that universities cannot work directly with athletes in distributing funds. Well, the impact of this settlement that will be signed in the fall is that every university in Texas Division I will receive part of this settlement. And ultimately, that $20 million amount that all universities will receive, they will need to work with the college athletes to disperse those settlement proceeds. And right now, our Texas law prevents that. It prevents universities from working directly with athletes in any regard with NIL. And the crux, the basis of this settlement that's coming out and will be signed by a judge in October is that these funds for each university will need to be dispersed. So the very need for this bill is tied directly to that. Our, what has been called a very responsible NIL law that's been modeled by the Big Ten and is currently part of Senator Cruz's efforts on the Commerce Committee to create a national model. Even though our bill has been lauded by all the universities in Texas as one of the best laws in Texas, it says something opposite of what this court ruling will say in October, which is that the funds distributed on this entire lawsuit to the universities themselves will need to be distributed to the NIL players. And right now, our law prevents that. In Texas, this bill will allow us to be in compliance with this settlement coming soon in the fall. The bill has three primary components. It allows, again, universities to enter into and distribute NIL agreements with student athletes, but to be clear, that is capped settlement money at $20 million for each institution, and that $20 million is part of this settlement that I'm talking about. The Power of Five conferences brought this forward, but all Division I universities in Texas are eligible for this $20 million sum per program. It also allows NIL agreements to be offered before a student athlete enrolls at an institution. That triggered Senator West's very appropriate question: do our NIL laws in general allow for young high school athletes to be signed? And the answer was yes. That wasn't a part of what this bill allows. That was an answer to Senator West that our current NIL laws on the books that we've had since 2021 allow that. And we all know that recruiting has been going on in high school living rooms for half a century, regardless of age. But what we're doing is, for this bill, we're creating some common sense by amending it, making sure that no athletes under 17 years of age will be eligible for an NIL agreement. And from 17 and older, no athlete in high school can receive any money under an NIL agreement until they're enrolled in college and participating in the program that they agreed to participate in. Their college experience has to begin before they can take on any NIL proceeds. Lastly, it provides flexibility by allowing universities and student athletes to comply with future NCAA or athletic conference rules. So as an example there, this $20 million distribution per university, there is a clause in the settlement that allows that to be reevaluated every 3 years. Why is that? Well, there might be a growing trend of revenue to the NCAA, and the agreement is to share a percentage of that trend. So every 3 years, this $20 million could eventually be 22 or 25 or 28 or 30 and can grow over time. This bill allows for those adjustments to be made. The bill preserves all other components of Texas' current NIL legislation. And so, for instance, we have protections in our Texas NIL bill that are different from other states in requiring a financial literacy course for our new athletes that might not know as much as they need to know about managing money and protecting those funds. There's nothing about that that changes. Our Texas law is also different prior to this bill and not changed by this bill, that sexually oriented businesses or alcohol or tobacco or other types of businesses cannot contract with our student athletes, and there's nothing about this bill that changes those protections that we felt in 2021 were very responsible to protect our student athletes. That's why, again, I mentioned the Big Ten adopted our Texas NIL law, because they found it to be one of the best in the nation. Other states are already updating their NIL laws in anticipation of this statute, of this settlement and of this court order that will be signed in October. Again, members, the settlement agreement is done, but the order from the judge won't be signed until we're out of session. So this bill is making sure that when we're gone and we're finished, that we're in compliance with this new agreement that all the other states have already adjusted their NIL laws to participate in. So with that, Mr. President, I know we'll have some questions. Again, members, we're going to have an amendment that will be the first amendment on the bill that will make sure there's an age requirement, an appropriate age included in the bill. That will be added in something for the first time ever. Since 2021, we haven't had that will be 17 and older will be the appropriate age, junior and high school basically, where these approaches will be made so that these new freshman classes of college athletes, it will be covered, but nothing below that age of 17. So with that, Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider House Bill 126.
Senator Birdwell, for what purpose?
Question to the author, Mr. President.
You yield?
Of course.
Thank you, Senator Creighton. We've talked briefly about some of my questions, so let me run through them real quickly. And some of them are subjective because we all can't determine what the future is. But let me just ask. I've got 6 questions. Let me ask real quickly, if I may. Is this bill enforceable against out-of-state actors?
Yes, the NIL agreements would be considered to be Texas-based NIL agreements. So as you would expect, and why your question is so good and appropriate, is there will be, I think Texas and Florida produce, the most talent in the nation, California as well, and all states in the country will be recruiting Texas athletes. Those agreements will be bound by Texas law, and certainly this settlement agreement we're complying with after this bill passes.
So OU and LSU, they come into Texas, they've got to obey this. They're not in any way relieved of these responsibilities simply because they're out of state with a national settlement.
That's right. They couldn't circumvent Texas laws. No.
Okay, correct. This is something of a subjective question because it's forecasting what may or may not happen. Do you expect the federal district court, which has yet to release the settlement, to be the final court order?
That's a great question. It could be appealed.
Because if either party recants the settlement, is this bill still enforceable?
Well, no, this bill would be tied to settlements based on House versus NCAA litigation.
So if for some reason either the House parties or the NCAA parties recant the settlement because what the judge puts forward was unexpected, if they recant, does that mean we come back next session and then respond? Does the bill remain enforceable even if you don't have an agreed upon settlement whenever this settlement's released?
The bill's tied to the primary components of the expected settlement agreement. So
if there's no settlement, the bill becomes void.
My understanding is if there was something wrong with the settlement and where it didn't happen, but that is not what I understand the case to be. But under that hypothetical, we already have an NIL law on the books.
Okay. Because, look, I don't expect that to be the probability. I don't expect it to be the probability that the settlement does not occur, but under the possibility that it might.
Yeah, Senator Birdwell, you and I have talked about, even off the floor, the potential for there to be other deal points that could continue to be negotiated. Of course, there's 3 different lawsuits that were traveling in this subject matter, but this bill deals specifically with a settlement that has been reached, but the judge has just not signed the order. To go further, once those other agreements have been reached, your hypothetical still might be true. We might find ourselves back in session in 2027 and being asked to comply with those agreements. That's why we need Congress to act so that there's uniformity across the nation and we're not found in the Wild West constantly reacting to the evolution that's moving much, much quicker than our sessions bring us in to respond.
My 4th question you've already answered in the tenets of what you've already said, so I'll skip to 5 here. Does the settlement, and I don't think it does, but does the settlement treat private or religiously chartered schools in any way different from state schools?
It does not.
Okay. You mentioned the 17-year-old requirement. I think that's in the amendment rather than the bill, but let me ask the question. Does the 17-year-old that may enact something require parental consent?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. I greatly appreciate it.
Senator Hancock, what purpose?
To ask the author a few questions.
Do yield.
I yield.
They're great, and I appreciate you bringing this one back. As you're aware, we had filed the bill with Representative Tepper on behalf of one of our constituents who happens to have a high position with tech these days, and recently appointed by Trump to address this issue with Congress. Are you aware I've actually have one of my neighbors and good friends who's been working on this issue with other states to try to craft a solution that you're looking at addressing in this legislation?
Yes, and I appreciate those efforts. I think that's certainly a large part of why we find ourselves here today with, thankfully, a settlement agreement instead of still being, in the matrix of just wondering what litigation outcomes could possibly bring.
Right.
And we're in session and able to do something about it.
Right, and like I said, my friend has been working on this, talking to Senator Huffman for about 2 years now, and very involved with the other states, trying to get a solution. I don't think any of us like where we are with NIL. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. We're just reacting and making sure that our programs and our student athletes are not excluded from these very valuable negotiations on their behalf.
And you're aware that if we don't do this, we're doing it for one part, for our university so that they can compete, in a world where this is changing, things are changing and other states have already moved in this direction. Would you agree with that?
We would be the only outliers of major programs and major conferences in the nation if we stood aside and did not allow this bill to pass. And yes, our university programs would be at a great disadvantage.
And I don't know if you've had, but I have had constituents with young men and women that because they live in our state and we have not done this, have contacted my office and said, hey, y'all need to pass something. My child wants to go to school in the state of Texas, but y'all are going to have to compete with the other people talking with my child.
That's a great point. I mean, we've got our student athletes, their moms and dads, their families calling in to make sure that Texas is in line with the other states so that we can compete. It also creates another level of fairness for the smaller universities and programs that don't have big NIL dollars because of this settlement and this disbursement by the NCAA. The smaller universities that otherwise didn't have NIL monies will now have a $20 million distribution they otherwise would not have had, which is one of the tenets of the reason why the lawsuit was brought. So competition, fairness for the student athletes and the families that you mentioned, Senator Hancock, and also fairness across our universities and our programs for the mid-size and small that otherwise haven't been able to compete at this level.
So, and you've heard of the term the Wild West.
I have. He sits right behind you.
He does sit behind me. But the NIL has been considered the Wild West because there have been no guardrails.
That's right.
All this bill's trying to do is get Texas prepared and caught up with what other states have done for when the guardrails come, that we don't have to come back here, but we've addressed the issues, and now we can go home knowing that Texas University, and Texas students will be in parity with other states across the country. Is that what you're trying to do here with this legislation?
That's exactly right.
I appreciate you bringing it back, and we've got a little bit of time left this session to make sure we allow universities and students to compete in the U.S.
Thank you for those clarifications, Senator Hancock.
Members, the motion is on suspension. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out in second reading House Bill 126.
I know. You're going easy
Secretary
on me,
will
man. You only had
Read the
half a
caption.
dozen.
House Bill 126 relating to the compensation and professional representation of prospective student athletes.
You're recognized on the following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 1 by Creighton.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, under current law, institutions are prohibited from providing or soliciting NIL compensation to a prospective student athlete. Individuals, corporate entities, other organizations are also prohibited from entering into an NIL arrangement with a prospective student athlete prior to their being enrolled in the university. This bill, as filed, removes these provisions so that universities can disperse the funds from this agreed-to settlement. This amendment adds a new subsection that prohibits institutions, individuals, corporate entities, or any other organization from entering into an arrangement with a prospective student athlete younger than 17 years of age, members. So this amendment is about age, an age-appropriate Texas law that makes sure that the concerns expressed on the floor when Senator West asked about our younger student athletes in high school, that they would be protected and that we would know after this amendment goes on the bill, it's only 17 years and older that could work on an NIL agreement, or any family member of theirs related to the student's name, image, or likeness. Members, I hope this amendment addresses some of the primary concerns that we talked about 2 nights ago and ensures that the guardrails are there for a level playing field for our young athletes. I move adoption.
And Senator Creighton, our members may not know that we had all of the, or most of the ADs and some presidents on a call, and the question was posed, will you come back next year and want to lower it to 16? And they said no. And we said no.
That's correct.
Question is on the amendment. Any objections? The amendment is adopted. You're recognized. Passage to third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move passage to third reading for House Bill 126.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passed to third reading and recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Move to suspend the 3-day rule.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Ward,
30 ayes and 1 non-sports fan. The 3-day rule is suspended. Chair lays out in third reading and final passage House Bill 126. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 126 relating to the compensation and professional representation of prospective student athletes.
You're recognized on final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move final passage of House Bill 126.
And thank you for you and Senator West and Senator Miles and Senator Colcourse and Senator Bettencourt and Senator Perry on that phone call, all of our major universities who said if this bill doesn't pass, they'll probably finish last in their conference. And had they only informed everyone in the Senate a few weeks ago what was happening, we would have passed it the first time. But everybody's kind of learned their lesson. It's good to talk to senators when you want their vote. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Bardwell, Blanco, Campbell.
Here's to winning in Texas. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members.
The Senate saved college sports in Texas. Senator Hall, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 3441.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, as many of you know, COVID brought us into a new awareness of the risk and problems with blind trust in pharmaceutical companies and in their relationship with our government. Currently, due to the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, vaccine manufacturers hold no liability if a vaccine or countermeasure harms or injures a Texan. This is the only product that I know of that cannot be held responsible for any injury to a consumer. Imagine what our society would look like if any other manufacturer had this same protection. And there are limited avenues for seeking compensation from the federal government. There are very few incidents where a government provides this level of blanket immunity to any company, and I believe that the bill author has spoken to thousands of families from both sides of this aisle who either don't vaccinate or who adhere to what's known as an altered schedule. There is much fear that comes from knowing that the company producing these medical products holds no accountability for the safety of their products, and this is often a large motivator in their decisions. So if you want everyone to get vaccinated, and I believe that this bill will provide peace of mind for concerned families, if you support vaccine choice or who is skeptical of the science around science, this bill seeks to provide the same kind of accountability that other companies have. This bill simply states that if a vaccine manufacturer chooses to advertise in the state of Texas, they could be liable for actual damages, reasonable attorney fees, and court costs if it's found in court that the advertised vaccine caused harm or injury to an individual in this state. The bill narrowly defines what it means to advertise in the bill and makes it clear that we're talking about TV ads and digital ads, radio ads, and over-the-top TV, which are paid for by the manufacturer. In no way do we have the intention of preventing doctors from being able to hand out pamphlets in their offices or encouraging their patients to get vaccinated. The bill does not include those actions under the definition of advertise. This bill does not debate whether someone should be vaccinated. It simply states if a vaccine manufacturer would like to advertise their so-called safe products, they should also accept responsibility for any injury caused by their products. After all, every other product manufacturer can be held responsible with their defective products that harm anyone. With that, Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Johnson, what purpose?
Question of the bill author.
Do you yield?
Yes.
Senator Hall, if this bill were to become law, would it conflict with federal law?
No, it would not.
How would it not?
Because this is an issue of deceptive advertising.
So they would be liable for deceptive advertising, not for an injury from the vaccine. So notwithstanding a federal law that says you can't be liable for a vaccine causing harm, you could be liable for the advertisement causing harm?
For deceptive advertising.
Wow. Okay.
Secretary, will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Wardwell,
21
Blanco.
ayes, 10 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays up. Second reading, House Bill 3441. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 3441 relating to the liability of vaccine manufacturers that advertise a harmful vaccine.
You recognize passage third reading.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
21 ayes, 10 nays. The bill passes to second reading. Third reading, rather. You have to suspend there. You need 4 friends. You have to suspend there. You only have 21 votes.
Okay. Let me see what I...
Senator Zaffarini, House Bill 4748, suspend the regular order of business. Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business in order to take up and consider at this time House Bill 4748 by Representative Pat Curry relating to state agency purchasing methods and procedures, including a state agency multiple award contract purchasing procedure. Members, generally this bill would authorize and set requirements for the comptroller or state agency to award multiple contracts to different vendors for similar goods or services through a defined multiple award purchasing process. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Any objection? Hearing none. Rules suspended. Chair lays out in second reading House Bill 4748. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 4748 relating to state agency purchasing methods and procedures.
You recognize on passage of third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to third reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passes to third reading and recognize suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be heard on 3 several days.
Any Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt.
31 ayes, no nays. The rule suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. House Bill 4748. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 4748 relating to state agency purchasing methods and procedures.
You recognize on final.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt.
31 ayes, no nays. Bill's finally passed, and I will catch up with you later. You want to.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Colcourse, recognize suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for House Bill 1690.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business and take up and consider at this time committee substitute to House Bill 1690. Members, committee substitute to House Bill 1690 was filed to increase transparency and improve regional communication in the groundwater permitting process, specifically for applications involving the transfer of groundwater out of a groundwater conservation district. Members, transfer project applications, like many that are going on in my district, just like all permitted applications, are processed pursuant to the requirements outlined in Chapter 36 of the district's rules, which provide for a notice and hearing process within the district boundaries. This allows public opportunity to review those proposed applications as well as work with their local jurisdiction on resources and assistance for potential reductions in water levels from those transfers. Mr. President, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business.
Any objection? Hearing none. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out in second reading committee substitute for House Bill 1690. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 1690 relating to an application for a permit for the transfer of groundwater out of a groundwater conservation district.
You recognize passes the third reading.
So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passes the third reading and recognize suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt.
31 ayes, no nays. The rule suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for House Bill 1690. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute House Bill 1690 relating to an application for a permit for the transfer of groundwater.
You recognize on final.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of committee substitute to House Bill 1690.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt.
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Hughes, are you finally ready on this bill? You're recognized to suspend the regular order of business and committee substitute for House Bill 1056 in solid gold.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time House Bill 1056. Senators, this bill is about liquid gold, and by liquid we mean transactional, usable, practical. This is a constitutional step forward in restoring sound money and putting gold and silver back to work for the people. This is about the democratization of precious metals. So it's not just for the rich, not just for the wealthy, but for everyone. And so many will recall back in the 84th legislature, 10 years ago, when Texas established the Bullion Depository. Senator Colhorst over here and Representative Capriglione worked on that bill. Many of us will remember that, and it's been in place for a while. We're building on that foundation now. And under this bill, what will happen? Texas will officially declare, as we are specifically allowed to do under Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, that gold and silver are legal tender. We can do that. And building upon Supreme Court precedent and the law that's already in place, this bill will set up a system for the comptroller to establish a way for Texans to deposit their gold in that bullion depository and then be able to access it, be able to transact with it on an electronic format. And now Texas is not the only state doing this. Arkansas just passed a bill. Florida just passed one. Missouri is working on it as well. And so many states are looking at this, but we're the only state. We're the only state with a depository. We have a real head start. And this bill will get us way down the road. And so I thank the members of the Finance Committee who looked at this in a good hearing and moved the bill forward on a committee substitute. The committee substitute, which the Finance Committee passed, establishes the framework and delegates rulemaking to the comptroller to work with financial institutions, to work with all the necessary parties to get this done right. And so that committee substitute was not a legislative council draft. So if the Senate sees fit to suspend, I'll be offering a floor amendment that conforms it to Leg Council conventions, has the same substance as we had in that committee substitute passed by the committee. And this is going to put those rules in place for the system to work and to access real money, sound money, another way to pay, protection from inflation, and really financial sovereignty for Texans. And that's what the bill does, and I move suspension.
Senator Johnson, for what purpose?
For questions of my favorite Senate floor colloquy partner.
Colloquy, did you say?
Yeah, I made that up. Colloquy partner.
I don't think that's a proper use of that word in that sentence.
Probably is not, but it's late.
I mean, I was an English major. I still don't know about dangling participles, but I don't think that's good. Senator, do you yield to him?
How could I not yield to that, Mr. President? I yield.
Colloquy partner.
Senator Hughes, a few questions about this. First, let's try to get an idea of what we're talking about here. Gold, without this bill becoming law, gold, would you agree, is a commodity?
Yes, the element, it's on the periodic table, and I can't remember the, you probably know, AU, I think it's a commodity, yes.
No, I don't mean it's an element on the periodic table. I mean, the way you purchase gold in markets is as a future, you can buy gold in the futures market. You can buy gold as a commodity, right?
As I understand, there are many ways. There are EFTs, there are money markets. You can also buy the literal physical gold, and sometimes that storage can be an issue. That's part of the reason for the depository. But yes, I think I agree with you.
So it's not currency, and this would make it currency, right?
To the extent that the Article 1, Section 10 says we can do that, that's exactly right. And as you probably know, Texas already took a big step along these lines when we passed a law saying there's no sales tax on gold and silver coins. They're not treated like items where you pay sales tax. They're treated differently for this reason. And we did that years ago.
So if this bill were passed, would I be able to purchase an $11 cup of coffee at an expensive coffee shop with gold?
Senator, yes, once this bill is fully implemented, then if you wish to deposit gold in the Texas Bullion Depository and set up your account, then you would have a debit card that would be acceptable where you can use a debit card, and yes, you could make purchases with that.
Now, if I weren't
Another way to
shopping for
pay.
coffee, but if I merely went out and bought a few bars of gold on the market, and let's say I buy them for $500 an ounce. I have no idea what gold costs today because I can't afford it. And I would deposit them in the gold depository. And a year from now, the price of gold on markets has tripled. It's now $1,500 an ounce. And I sell that gold. Would I have tax consequences upon that sale?
So there's, as you know, as far as sales taxes go, if we're talking about coins, those would not be an issue. As far as U.S. income taxes, and the IRS is going to have to give us an answer on this, but in that situation, without this bill, without the bullion depository and without this bill, that would be a capital gain.
Now, I haven't asked a question beyond that.
Yes, sir.
But I will, and I appreciate you giving me the background. I feel like you answered my question, but if you had more to say, I think you're going to answer my next question, which is...
Well, forgive me, I may have not answered the question. So if this bill is implemented and you put that gold in the depository and then make a purchase with that and the price has gone up, since it is currency, our position will be that for the IRS standpoint, you're not going to have to pay income tax just like you wouldn't on francs or on pesos or whatever.
I always appreciate your candor, Senator Hughes. I think it's important that people hear what was just said here. I don't know if we're gonna. I guess everyone has a right to do business on the Senate floor, but this is a very important point.
Group of noise right there. And some noise back in the hall down there, too.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very important point, and Senator Hughes has been very clear in his response. The question is, if we do this, will the purchase of a cup of coffee or a Mercedes-Benz or anything else with the gold that you own and hold in the Texas depository trigger the same capital gains tax that you would incur if you were to simply sell the gold? Senator Hughes' answer was the IRS is going to have to answer, and correct me, Senator Hughes, if I mischaracterize this, but he answered that the IRS will have to answer that question for us, but it is their intent that you can invest in gold, get a little debit card backed by your gold, spend the gold as currency, and not trigger a capital gains. Think about that. You got $1 million in gold bars. It triples in value to $3 million. You go buy a $3 million house with your gold credit card, and you don't pay any capital gains tax on that $2 million. Is that what we're saying here?
Well, Senator, the IRS is going to answer that question, and as you know, we don't have authority in Texas code to dictate that. That's certainly the hope. Regardless of what happens there, the depository and the transactional system is another way to pay. It makes it easier for real folks not to be buying houses like that, but everyone would be available. It'd make it easier for real folks to invest in gold, to keep their gold in a safe place. We will make the case that that's what the IRS should do. Just like, Senator, if you put that money in a foreign currency and then took it back. As you know, you don't pay tax on that because it's a currency. So that's going to be a bonus. This bill is about making the gold depository accessible to Texans, another way to pay, a hedge against inflation. But yes, that's going to be argued as well, what you just said. Of course, the feds will have ultimate say on that.
I always appreciate the clarity and candor of our conversations. Members, I believe this is a state vehicle for tax evasion, and I oppose it.
Senator King, what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for a question or two?
Of course, I'll yield.
Thank you, Senator. And I guess pun intended, but I really see this as a golden opportunity for Texas. And drum rolls.
I think it is.
And I was remembering back to when the depository legislation was passed, and the idea that was very clearly debated then was that it could be used as a place for storage, and we had all that, if I remember right, we had all that gold stored in New York and other places.
Yes, sir.
And that Texas could store its gold in Texas, but also that Texans could store their own gold, because you've either You can keep it at your house if you buy some, because most people buy it as a physical commodity. And you can store it at your own house, but it can be a little risky, so then you got to have a safe deposit box or something like that. And the idea was, and Representative Capriglione really was his genius, I think, was the idea that we could have a singular place where it could be deposited and traded in Texas, and that someday we might be able to go to where we could have an ATM type card. If I wanted to buy a car from you that we negotiated on a price, and I could give you that card, and you had an account there too, and it was a new way of exchange. Is that kind of the way you remember those early thoughts going?
Senator, I do recall those discussions. We were over in the House, and back then we talked about being able to trade units of gold in that depository, right? Like you said, I owed you some money, and I'll transfer some of my gold to you using that electronic system. I do remember that.
Okay. And in some ways, it's no different than the discussions with cryptocurrency today, where you're exchanging things that are not cash as backed up by U.S. depositories and things of that nature. So, and by the way, have you opened an account? Have you opened in the depository?
Senator King, I'm embarrassed I have not, but I'm going to. Do you have an account?
I do, and it'll cost you $50 to go and open the account. I found that, and you can physically deposit your gold there, and you can really go for the gold in that way. But I guess the thing I wanted to really ask you is, I can't ever think, and tell me, can you think of any time, and this isn't meant with no disrespect to Senator Johnson, but I think it was an interesting policy discussion. I can't think of any other time that we've had a discussion on this floor, or any time I've been in the legislature, where we discussed what Texas might be doing, what we might be setting up, and how that affects federal income tax for individual taxpayers. Do you remember discussions like that?
I really don't, and as you know, folks look at folks who get accountants to help them find ways to reduce their tax liability. I think you have a duty to do that, and the feds are going to do what they're going to do. And if this results in Texans paying less federal income tax, wonderful bonus. But you're right, that's not really set out in this bill.
And the common way that gold is treated today, if you go buy 10 ounces of gold for $2,000 and you hold onto it for a year and you sell it for $3,000, then you're going to have a capital gains then, and you report that, and you're expected to report it. And that's the way the IRS kind of deals with it today. And so is it your assumption that with this commodity market, this exchange market, that this could be developing, that the same thing would occur, and the IRS is going to figure out whatever rules they have for that? And I hope it ends up being a wonderful shelter myself, because I don't like to pay capital gains. But your understanding and expectation is, whatever it is, it's going to be like everything else. If we change real estate law, we know that real estate capital gains are going to be figured out by the feds. If we deal with anything else in business, we know they're going to take care of it. You're expecting the same process to be for this?
Senator King, that's exactly right.
All right. Well, just the last question. I know that you keep up with modern economic theory, and particularly some of the things that the Trump administration is doing. So just final question. Do you think that this really has the opportunity to help Texas follow America into the golden age?
I certainly hope so, Senator King.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Johnson, did you want to make a quick response, or do you want me to go to Senator Hinojosa next? Go ahead and follow up, then I'll go to Senator Hinojosa.
Senator Hughes, do you know whether crypto gains are taxed?
I do not know how that works. If you know, I'd love to. I don't know how crypto gains or losses work.
Capital gains taxes on crypto gains.
Okay.
Yes, there are capital gains taxes on crypto gains, just to clarify the discussion with Senator King.
Senator Hinojosa, what purpose?
Well, Senator Yield, just a couple of questions.
Of course, I'll yield.
Senator Hughes, how about be a little bit more practical in my
Yes,
questions? Your bill barely wobbled out of finance by one vote.
Senator, that's right. It was and of course, the bill that was filed looked a lot different than the committee substitute, and the committee members, I think, liked the approach taken, same substance as the House bill, but in a streamlined form.
And I don't think the issue is with having a depository for gold. We can have that. I think the issue is more practical. How do you implement this type of system, financial system, with all our retail stores throughout the state of Texas? And how much does a person have to pay to deposit their gold or silver in a depository?
So the depository already exists, as you noted. They tell us there's about $300 million worth of gold. I don't have an account. Obviously, none of that is mine, but there's about $300 million worth of gold in the depository today. But what we don't have is this electronic way to access it. So as far as the system for using it, there's an existing system that whenever you use your credit card or your debit card, there's a network that already exists. So this is just going to be plugged into that. So it's not going to be necessary to build a whole new system because there's already a system for using credit cards and debit cards. So this will just be plugged into that system.
So this, will this become a state bank?
So, Senator, not a bank that issues loans, and not a bank that, for example, has a fractional reserve system, right? If a bank has to keep, I guess, 10% of its deposits on hand, and the rest is being invested and making money for their members. That's good. In this case, this is more like Fort Knox. All the gold that's supporting these transactions is literally in the Texas Bullion Depository. So not a bank that makes loans or anything like that, but they're just that'll be the basis for these transactions.
Even the Comptroller's office, when there were questions there at the Finance Committee hearing, were not quite sure how this system could be implemented. It's a real concern that many of the questions that are very practical in nature and the way the financial system works were not answered. And you mentioned that there were other states who have passed legislation creating this type of system. Have any of those states implemented the system?
No, sir. It's some states have passed laws making gold and silver coin legal tender, but this electronic system, states are just now doing this. Arkansas just passed their bill a few weeks ago. The Florida bill, I believe, was signed today or the last couple of days. So it's just now happening. And you may recall in that committee substitute that the Finance Committee supported, we extend the implementation dates to give the Comptroller's office plenty of time. They've got a lot on their plate. So we extend the implementation to give them more time.
So other states have not implemented this laws that they passed.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Two or three states have passed it, but it's not been implemented yet. It's just now happening.
And that's part of the problem. We don't have any experience or know how it really would work in real, actual practice.
That's right. This has not been done before by a state. There are other products like this. There's debit cards, credit cards, and cards that can access different types of currencies. So all the pieces are there, but putting them all together, we want to make sure we give the comptroller plenty of time. And the bill says they can use contractors. The bill says they can work with financial institutions. You may recall the last witness that testified in the Finance Committee said, we already have these banks and credit unions. Let's employ them in this process. Let's use them. And so the committee substitute that's before us, it says financial institutions can also participate in the system, just to make that clear.
You know, Senator Hughes, I know you're very enthusiastic about this bill, but the reality is that many problems, many issues that have been resolved, and many questions that have been answered properly. So, all the respect, I'm going to vote no on your bill. But
No, I understand, Senator. Thank you. I understand.
Secretary will call the roll on
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook.
19 ayes, 12 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out. Committee substitute for House Bill 1056. Secretary, read the caption.
Thank you.
Committee substitute House Bill 1056 relating to the recognition of gold and silver specie as legal tender.
Following amendment, Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 1 by Hughes.
Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, floor amendment number 1 is the Legislative Council draft of the committee substitute, which the committee passed. The Finance Committee passed a committee substitute, and the draft was prepared, finalized shortly before the hearing. It was not a Legislative Council draft. So the amendment before you takes the elements in the committee sub and arranges them in Legislative Council format. I can represent to you that this is the same substance that the committee passed. It's a floor amendment that conforms it to Legislative Council drafting conventions. And that's what this amendment number 1 does.
Any objection? Hearing none. Following amendment to the amendment. Secretary, read the amendment to the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 2 by Bettencourt, amending Floor Amendment Number 1.
Senator Bettencourt, on your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment moves back the project deadlines by striking September 1, 2026 and substituting May 1st, 2027, and then striking the initial start from May 1st, 2026 to September 1, 2026. Senator Hughes, I've done some major projects, and many multi-million-dollar projects, and specifically conversion of the tax office that took approximately 2.5 years. And I think it's important that when we look at a project this size, Senator Hinojosa's comments, that we look at a 2-year project window at a minimum. There's obviously some permissives here in the bill, but it's important to recognize the obvious that of the states that we've been talking about, the state of Texas is an order of magnitude and size, Mr. President, and we need to recognize that and provide enough time to at least make a project deadline a potential possibility. And I think these a 2-year time frame at least gets that in the right direction. So I know we've had that discussion, and from personal experience as being a project director, I think 2-year implementation of this is aggressive but doable because this is a complex financial project.
Senator West, what purpose?
Question to Senator Bettencourt.
Do you yield?
Yes.
Senator Bettencourt, let's see, this is going to be at the Comptroller's office. The Comptroller's office will probably need new staff in order to do this.
Right. When you look at the...
And so, let me finish. All right. Okay.
No, you go ahead.
All right.
On the other hand.
On the other hand, right. And let's see, ESAs are passed, and the Comptroller's office is going to have to implement ESAs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Which means a whole new structure is going to have to be set up over there, and that's going to take new employees also, right?
Right, and that's clearly a priority, and this would not be the top priority.
Not my priority, but it is a priority, okay.
Right.
I mean, realistically.
Realistically.
Okay. And Texas has never done this. We're looking at other states that are just doing this. And so this is kind of a project of first impression for the state of Texas, which the Comptroller would end up having to do. Don't you think the Comptroller, in addition to all the other things the Comptroller is tasked to do, don't you think that the Comptroller has enough on his or her plate?
I spoke to Comptroller Hager tonight, and you have literally replicated the conversation. They have obvious priority and a completely new ESA system that they have to implement by time specific, and it's faster than this project. And because of the fact that any organization, even of the size of the Comptroller, has 4,000 or so employees, you're going to have basically a management choke point where you're looking at bid specifications.
I'm sorry, you said what, a management what?
A management choke point where you're looking at bid specs going out. So you have to look at a project of this taking probably 9 months to be able to get bids out on the street. Now, depending upon how many projects, vendors you have and their success to date, that process of closing that PO could take, at least another 90 days or more. You need a minimum of a year to be able to put this system into the field. And that's why I approached Senator Hughes to push these project deadlines out as far as he, would reasonably able to agree. And I'm really acting as a stand-in for the administrator that the 2-year project timeline is a minimum.
So realistically, we should wait until the next legislative session. We should wait until the next legislative session to do this.
Well,
given the fact that the Comptroller has the ESA to put together, the Comptroller has the regular duties and responsibilities, plus those others that we've already placed on. This is a major undertaking by the state of Texas, Senator Hughes. And it seemed as though we would not put the comptroller's staff on overload. As many business persons in this body know, that we should be more thoughtful in terms of these types of projects. And I would hope that the persons here would use business common sense in addressing this particular bullion.
And Senator West, you're absolutely right, which is why I offered the amendment. And speaking as administrator, I'm, speaking on behalf of whoever the administrator is, for lack of a better description, acting it as a neutral broker and a neutral on the bill. But I believe the amendment is acceptable to the author.
Senator Menendez, what purpose?
Quick questions of the author of the amendment, Mr. President.
Do you yield?
Certainly.
Thank you. Senator Bencourt, first of all, thank you for the amendment. The only question I had was, I see where you substituted the May 1st, 2027. What I didn't understand was the difference between May 1st, 2026 and putting in September 2026.
Well, there's an effective date of the project itself. I see Mark in the back and go through the analysis of it, and then there's an implementation schedule. So the implementation schedule would be 2 years out, and that would be moving from September 1, 2026 to substitute for May 1st, 2027, and then the effective date, not of the bill, but the initial part of the card would be struck from May 1st to September 1. So that would give a additional 5 months for that portion of it. And I think that as much as the FEVR for the project is high, it runs into a rational time limit. And I think this is important for whoever takes that office to have some extra time. And to Senator West's comment, I have no doubt, I'm 100% certain that the implementation of this will be not done earlier than next session. Okay.
Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you.
I have to agree with you. Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Parker on the amendment to the amendment? I'm sorry, Senator Hughes on the amendment to the amendment.
As long as it didn't become Senator Birdwell and Senator Betancourt, we're okay.
It's getting late.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is important discussion for senators who are working to get this done right. We want to make sure the comptroller has plenty of time. And so the amendment is acceptable to the author.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment to the amendment is adopted. Now we're on the amendment. Any objection to his amendment? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. You are now recognized on passage to third reading.
Mr. President, move passage to third reading.
Secretary will call the roll when ready.
They wouldn't mess up what I mean.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt.
18 ayes, 12 nays. The bill passes the third reading. You hold there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, senators.
Senator Parker. Members, we're getting ready to hear another bill. Senator Parker, you're recognized to suspend the intent calendar to the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate's...
On House Bill 150, I'm sorry.
I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business and the intent calendar to take up the committee substitute to House Bill 150. Members, every policy we champion, securing our water supply, modernizing government services, hardening the grid, rests on a digital foundation that is under constant siege. Last year alone, confirmed breaches exposed the personal data of over 15 million Texans, nearly half of our state. In raw numbers, malicious actors probe Texas networks more than 40,000 times every second. Far from abstract, those attacks shut down rural hospitals, they siphon school district payrolls, and freeze county court records. A single ransomware infection can undo decades of prudent governance in one afternoon. The committee's substitute to House Bill 150 establishes the Texas Cyber Command, an independent state agency with one mission: protect, defend, and restore the digital assets of this state. We consolidate all cybersecurity functions now dispersed across the Department of Information Resources and place them into a single, accountable chain of command. A real-time threat intelligence center will correlate threats with telemetry from our own networks and push actionable alerts within minutes, not hours, to every state agency and any local government that opts in at no cost. A 24-hour incident response unit will stage go kits of clean servers, satellite links, and forensics gear so that when a city hall wakes up to an attack in the middle of the night, help is on site before business starts in the morning. And a digital forensic laboratory will work with law enforcement to preserve evidence to federal standards, turning cyber attacks from anonymous hits into prosecutable crimes. Under today's fragmented model, large agencies can afford robust cybersecurity programs and on-staff analysts. Small school districts, however, in rural counties cannot, so they patch and they pray. HB 150 levels that playing field. Baseline intelligence, phishing-resistant training, and emergency hotline support are open to every opting local entity. Optional premium services are capped at the command's actual margin cost, never a profit center. This chamber confirms the command's chief controls its purse strings, receives biennial performance metrics, and will put the agency through full sunset review in 2031, with an early review trigger if the Sunset Commission detects any drift. We retain full control, even as we empower professionals to fight a 24-hour war that we cannot afford to lose. Members, the federal government has recognized that scattering cyber duties across multiple agencies created dangerous scams and seams, and have since consolidated assets under U.S. Cyber Command and CISA. HB 150 brings that same clarity to Texas. One commander, one playbook, one hotline when the unthinkable happens. By uniting our defenses, we will not merely endure the next attack, we will blunt it. We will bounce back faster and hold the perpetrators accountable. Members, safeguarding our digital frontier is the price of admission for every other goal that we pursue this session and every session, and HB 150 answers that call. Members, I will have a perfecting amendment to correct a few technical drafting errors on the bill. And with that, Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Menendez, what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask the author of the bill a couple of questions.
Do you yield?
I yield.
Thank you, Senator Parker. So on the 150, on House Bill 150, the Texas Cyber Command, I believe you may have laid it out in your layout, but some Texans may want to know why San Antonio. And I can easily make the argument why it's best, but like I said earlier to the governor's chief of staff, I said, to me, wherever it would have been the best public policy for this cyber command to go is where it needs to go. And but it's because of, if you could repeat to me, tell me why the reasons.
No, Senator, thank you for that. And you know, when we were in committee on this various topic, I was asked that question as well. And of course, I'm blessed to represent Senate District 12 up in North Texas. Incredibly proud of all the incredible technology and skills and capabilities that we have there. But frankly, there's no other place, not just in the United States, but frankly anywhere in North America like San Antonio with regard to cyber skills. You have just an enormous amount of depth. You have all the federal capabilities that are both federal military as well as federal civilian. You have all of the leading service providers in the country, and for that matter, in North America, that have huge prominent positions there. And certainly on top of that, you have a world-class school in UTSA that has excellent cyber skills. So all of those things just made it very clear that you wanted to be in that cyber ecosystem that uniquely San Antonio can provide. There's no question with all those capabilities, particularly all those federal capabilities, that it's the right place to be.
And amongst those, even though your committee sub establishes to be an independent state agency, it also removes a mandate that this has to be at UTSA. It establishes that wherever they designate as the best option is where it will go, correct?
Well, that's exactly right. There'll be, an MOU, the Cyber Command, the leader of Cyber Command will make the right determination as to what the interim home will be it in the San Antonio area.
Right.
Be it there in downtown, there's a particular building opportunity there, or whether or not it's at a military base. All of those options are on the table, but it will absolutely be in San Antonio.
And all of the security experts testified in committee that the most important thing that we can do is get this up and running as soon as possible. Did they not?
Senator, look, that's exactly right. Look, this is not a Republican issue, a Democrat issue. This is an issue for Texans. This is an issue for Americans. This is about the safety and survival of all 31 million of us. God forbid some of the horrific things that we can imagine that could occur because of cyber attacks. That's what this is all about. We need to be singularly focused on what is happening here. The men and women of DIR have done an amazing job for years and years. We're so grateful to them. But now today, given the advent of this challenge and how it becomes exponentially greater every year, time is not our friend. As I've said that before in committee, we absolutely need to take action immediately. All the experts are telling us that. That's why speed to getting this up and running is essential. And we believe that this plan, this approach that's been well vetted and visiting with you, Senator, and all the wonderful folks on BNC has been a real blessing to get this bill where it is here tonight.
In this Cyber Command, if I recall correctly, you said this would help all small municipalities, counties, those many small agencies that don't have the financial wherewithal to protect themselves. The state would help use its expertise in this Cyber Command to provide assistance. Is that not correct?
That's exactly correct. In my layout, I commented on they try to patch and then they pray when they're these smaller entities. They don't have a full-time cyber capability. They will all have the ability now. All these smaller entities, governmental entities in the state, they can choose to opt in to be a part of Texas Cyber Command. So that's exactly right, and be able to get the benefit that accrues to them accordingly.
I want to thank you for bringing this bill, fighting so hard for this bill. I know it wasn't easy, but it's a big lift, but it's important for the whole state.
Well, thank you, Senator. I think that's exactly right. I think it's so important for the whole state. I think it's so important for the whole country. Because we all know the future of America depends on a strong Texas, and that's what this is all about.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
You're recognized to the motion to suspend the rules. Any objection? Hearing none. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading. House Bill 150. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee Substitute House Bill 150 relating to the establishment of the Texas Cyber Command.
There is an amendment, members. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 1 by Parker.
Senator Parker, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment simply corrects a few drafting errors that were missed in the committee substitute, specifically correcting some cross-references in the bill and removing the section dealing with data governance that should remain with DIR. And again, Mr. President, members, I move adoption.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. You recognized passage to third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to third reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. You're recognized. Bill passed to third reading. Recognized to suspend the constitutional three-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out in third reading and final passage. House Bill 150. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee Substitute House Bill 150 relating to the establishment of the Texas Cyber Command.
You're recognized on final.
Mr. President, members, first of all, I just want to thank you so very much for your support of this critical piece of legislation for Texas. This is a huge step forward to protecting this state and, frankly, the nation. Governor Patrick, I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank Governor Abbott. I want to thank Senator Shorten and the members of BNC and all the members for being a part of this process and getting us where we are tonight. It's such an important thing for our future to protect the survival and safety of all 31 million Texans. With that, Mr. President, I move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members.
Senator Hall, we are back on, bless you. Senator Hall, was that Betancourt walking by? Sneeze? You sneezed right in the middle of his motion. Yeah. Senator Hall, you're recognized to suspend the constitutional three-day rule. You found some friends on House Bill 3441.
So moved, Mr. President.
We'll wait 1 second for the Secretary to return to the mic. We're on constitutional three-day rule.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
25 ayes, 6 nays. Rule is suspended. You're now recognized. I'm sorry. We now lay out House Bill 3441, third reading and final passage. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 3441 relating to the liability of vaccine manufacturers that advertise a harmful vaccine.
Senator Cook, did you want to speak on the bill? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So y'all know this one is near and dear to my heart. I've given a lot of vaccines, received a lot of vaccines, cared for a lot of vaccinated patients, cared for a lot of unvaccinated patients, have watched people suffer from all kinds of issues, including COVID-19. Have given a lot of vaccines that really never come up in this chamber, like the rabies vaccine. And I'm just kind of curious if folks in here know how we got to the place that we're at right now with vaccine manufacturer liability. The first thing that I just want to note is that vaccine manufacturers and companies are pharmaceutical manufacturers and companies. These are not some different boogeymen manufacturers and companies. These are the same people that produce your lisinopril, your Coreg, your blood thinners, your flu shots, your everything that you take on a daily basis, your Tylenol, your Advil. These are all the same companies. And I just want to make that very clear because sometimes I think from our discussions in committee, it can almost seem like these are two completely different entities when every single medication on the shelf Every single medication that my patients take on a daily basis are made by exactly these same manufacturers and companies. It's not really true that vaccine manufacturers are not liable. That's a bit of a misunderstanding or a misrepresentation of what's actually happening out there. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what happened between 1982 and 1986 that gave us the passage of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act in 1986. In 1982, a spate of misinformation about childhood vaccines, this time it was the Tdap vaccine, started to proliferate, not unlike the misinformation that vaccines cause autism, which of course is still happening today, although it's been repeatedly disproven. And both the Biden and Trump administrations understand that vaccines do not cause autism. So when that happened, the vaccine manufacturers and companies, pharmaceutical manufacturers, were flooded with lawsuits. All kinds of people were saying that the Tdap vaccine caused brain damage. And so it became almost overnight impossible for pharmaceutical companies or vaccine manufacturers to remain solvent. They would be unable to continue producing vaccines for Americans, despite them being, by this point, several decades of proof that these are incredibly effective, life-saving, modern miracles. And so Congress had to do something. So they passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, which gave us the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, VICP, most commonly in literature. The point of that is so that we could continue to produce vaccines, continue to vaccinate Americans, and also make sure that people do have access to some sort of resources and funding when there is an issue. One of the more serious issues, of course, would be something like anaphylaxis, where you have an allergic reaction that's so serious, your throat closes up, you go into shock. That actually happens, they estimate, less frequently than a lightning strike, truly. It's very, very, very uncommon, although it does sometimes happen, and you always have to watch for it. I want to share a little bit about a really, really good book that I've read called Complications by the physician Atul Gawande. And I recommend it for anybody who's doing any kind of work around health and human services. Super interesting kind of journey through this physician's career and his understanding of how we handle morbidity and mortality, how we handle mistakes and complications in medicine, and the importance of understanding how a litigious culture in America has led us to a place where we are not a team. But we understand with certain surgeries, with certain medications, no matter what kind of intervention we do, there is always risk associated. Sometimes there are risks associated with mistakes or negligence, but sometimes there are just bad outcomes that happen no matter how perfectly you perform a surgery, no matter how well tested a medication or vaccine is. Sometimes when you do something to millions of people, bad things just do happen. And there doesn't always have to be someone to blame. And the better way to set up our society would be to understand that these things happen and create these pots of resources that folks can reach into when something bad, when something unlucky does happen to them. And this book goes into this at length and then compares American culture to other cultures as well around the world. And one example that he gave was a kid had gotten an x-ray for something very simple, a chest x-ray, and not too long after, but a ways after, ended up being diagnosed with a very strange form of lung cancer that affected young people. And so the child's father was also a physician and reached out to the radiologist who had read the original x-ray and said, "What happened? How did you miss this?" And it was just an honest mistake. It was so small, he was looking at it as a pre-procedure x-ray, wasn't looking for that on there. It was just a mistake. And after weeks and weeks of discussions between these two physicians, they figured out the dad had to sue the radiologist, had to, or there was no other way, no other mechanism for them to recover in any way or access the resources that they now needed to treat something that was much further down the line than it could have been if it was caught. And so I just want to emphasize that we have a very, very litigious culture in the United States. And I think a lot of people have voted in favor of things like tort reform. Lots of discussion this year around, I don't want to bring it up, but it comes up. We're a very litigious culture. It does not always do us a service, especially when it comes to medicine. When it comes to something where we know that even if you do it perfectly, you may end up with a bad outcome. So I actually really want to commend us in the 1980s for realizing we can't rely on lawsuits. This isn't going to work. Financially, it isn't sound. We want to make sure that Americans are vaccinated. We want to make sure that kids are taken care of. So if a vaccine is going to be listed on the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, it has to be recommended for pregnant women and children, which the COVID vaccine now is as of 2023. It has to be, there has to be a list of kind of what we expect and what we don't expect as bad outcomes of the vaccine that could qualify you for reaching into that pot of money and bringing out resources. And you have to also, Congress has to act in a way that basically takes 75 cents out of every vaccine and puts it into this pot of money so that it's sitting there. So anyone right now who has a side effect of a recommended vaccine can file a petition in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, which is reviewed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and Departments of Justice, and they reach a final decision about whether or not you can actually, under the VICP, receive compensation for something bad that happened to you from a vaccine. The problem right now, or the problem as some of my colleagues view it, is that COVID-19 is not in the VICP, it's in the CICP. And the CICP is the Countermeasure Program, This is because we relied on the PrEP Act, the declaration that we were in an emergency, in order to produce a large number of COVID vaccines really, really rapidly. And we ended up vaccinating or giving over 1 billion vaccinations worldwide. And so now it's very tested and, of course, has been widely used and saved millions of lives from COVID. So the VICP program and the CICP program are working as they are designed. And these programs can provide fair and efficient compensation for a wide range of adverse side effects that you might see after receiving a vaccine. The CICP admittedly does not have quite a robust compensation program as the VICP, which is why we want to ultimately see COVID probably moved into that VICP category. That is the correct next step. As we give this vaccine, as we continue seeing it develop and evolve, we of course want to see them all move into the VICP. It's a better pot of money to be able to reach into. What is happening right now is that there is misinformation circulating about all vaccines, but also about the COVID-19 vaccine. So people are looking to get litigious. In my opinion, that is the wrong move to make if you care anything about public health, or if you want to see pharmaceutical companies remain solvent, or if you want to see us be able to produce all vaccines that children need. Again, there's not one single COVID-19 vaccine manufacturer. These are the same companies that make every vaccine, that make all of our medications. The reason that we set up the CICP under the declaration of the PrEP Act was because of what I experienced on a daily basis in the emergency department for 2 years. I watched people drop dead in front of their family members. I watched coworkers take their own lives by suicide. I watched people fight for their lives on ventilators every single day. We watched refrigerator trucks fill up all over this nation. I watched friends very nobly and bravely take travel assignments where they would have 30 ICU patients, all on ventilators, fighting for their lives. What was happening during the COVID-19 pandemic was not normal. And we needed big action, and we needed it fast. And President Trump oversaw it, and we saved millions of lives. So now, as things naturally progress, as these continue getting tested, as we continue to give millions of doses of all these vaccines, as COVID potentially moves its way into the VICP, which is what I would say people should be advocating for if they want to see more oversight, more compensation, as we work on things like our reporting systems, to my chairwoman's point, adding litigious or lawsuits or this punitive measure back in would be a huge, huge misstep. We want vaccines to be available. We want them to be widely distributed. We want folks to absolutely be informed when they take them. We want them to be safe. So opening these vaccine manufacturers and these vaccine companies up to lawsuits is the wrong move. It's bad for public health. It's going to be bad for me in the emergency department when folks can't get their hands on vaccines and they're coughing and sneezing and breathing on me while I'm starting their IVs. It'll make my coworkers less safe, and it'll make all of us less safe. Now more than ever, Texas needs to be the leader in improving vaccination rates. The Department of State Health Services reports 729 cases of measles. 94 people have been hospitalized, and 2 children have died. This is not the time to roll back safety measures. This is not the time to open up vaccine manufacturers to liability. This is the time for us to band together and realize that even when we do really good things on a big scale, sometimes bad things do happen. And we don't want them to, and we want them fixed as quickly as possible. And we want to say we're sorry when we're wrong and ask for forgiveness, and we want to make things right for people. But in my opinion, opening up vaccines to a flood of lawsuits that are invalid, that are frivolous, that will be saying things like absolute lies and misinformation that's all over the internet right now, would be a huge, huge mistake, make Texas a lot more dangerous, and put us in a really strange situation economically as well. Being the only state where suddenly vaccines are liable and there can be a flood of frivolous lawsuits seems really short-sighted to me. So I encourage y'all, if you have issues with the way the COVID-19 vaccine has been vetted or administered, advocate for it to be moved into the VICP. I think that's a really reasonable thing to be advocating for. Ask Congress to act on that. And I encourage y'all to pick up a copy of Complications. It's an incredible, incredible book, super quick read, really quick listen, that just helps us understand a lot more about how liability and a litigious culture in the United States affects our health care. So I urge y'all, please vote no on this bill. We don't want to end up with no vaccines for Texas. Thank y'all.
Chair recognizes Senator Hall. Final passage.
Move final passage of House Bill 3441.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
21 ayes, 10 nays, bills finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members.
Senator Menendez, you're recognized on House Bill 4134. Suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take and consider at this time House Bill 4134. This bill clarifies that creditors who are subject to Chapter 348 may offer their own customers various payment methods options, including options that may be accompanied by a fee, in order to expedite and apply the payment immediately to the customer's account. Under House Bill 4134, the holder's electronic payment fee must be reasonably related to the expense incurred by the holder. That means it does not exceed the lesser of $10 or 5% of the payment. In addition, under House Bill 4134, the holder or the holder's agent must allow the borrower to make a payment by a method other than electronic payment that does not incur a fee, that is not established electronic payment as the expected form of payment, and inform the borrower that the amount of the fee to be charged, the options to make the payment by alternative method that does not require a fee, and that the holder may not establish an electronic payment as the expected form of payment. This new option will provide a quick, cost-effective choice for customers. For those reasons, I move suspension of the regular order of business, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Chair lays out second reading House Bill 4134. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 4134 relating to a convenience fee for processing electronic payments for motor vehicles.
Do you recognize on passage to third reading?
I move passage to third reading, Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none. Bill passes to third reading. You recognize suspend the constitutional three-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt,
30
Barbaros.
ayes, 1 nay. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. House Bill 4134. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 4134 relating to a convenience fee for processing electronic payments for motor vehicles.
You recognize on final.
Mr. President, I move final passage of House Bill
Secretary, call the
4134.
roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt.
30 ayes, 1 nay. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Hagenbu, you recognize for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 1234.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, currently individuals who are denied a license to carry a handgun based on a medical advisory board panel recommendation do not have a formal opportunity to review or respond to the decision before it is finalized. House Bill 1234 seeks to address this issue by requiring the Department of Public Safety to provide a denied applicant with the reason for the denial and a 30-day period for the applicant to provide additional information for use in supplementing or clarifying the application. That's basically the bill. I'm offering an amendment just that provides clarifying language. In the current bill, there's a phrase in one place that says medically advisory board. We need to correct that so it says medical advisory board panel, keeping it germane to the rest of the bill. With that, Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Johnson, for what purpose?
Questions of the author?
Senator Hagenbu, do you yield?
Of course.
Oh, Senator Hagenbu, is this a pro-voting bill?
A
pro-voting bill.
Pro-voting. No, it's simply a bill to allow people to have due process.
And this is regarding delays in obtaining a license to carry a handgun, right?
Correct.
Does anyone need a license to carry a handgun in Texas?
Do they need a license to carry a handgun?
Does Texas law require that you have a license in order to carry a handgun?
No, it doesn't.
So why are we worried about the delay for somebody to get a license? I mean, if you want to call it a delay, why are we worried about a 1-month period of time that it may take for someone to get a license? And this kind of like, special expedited, does it almost strike of whining? Like, they can have a gun anyway.
No one. I've been accused of a lot of things before. I'm not a whiner usually.
I believe you're not a whiner, sir.
No, all I know is that the law currently has this in it where a person can be go from a medical board, be denied, and this is just offer them due process. And it could be, frankly, I think people deserve due process no matter what it has to do with. In this case, it has to do with.
Is there currently an appeal process that they can avail of?
Pardon me?
Is there currently an appeal process that they can avail of?
I believe not. That's what this is supposed to do, is allow a person to appeal process.
If there were an appeal process, would you take the bill down?
I'd have to think about it.
I think your bill just expedites it.
I don't see any harm in this bill, even if it was somewhat duplicative or something. I mean, it just says the person has due process.
Appreciate the answers.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Menendez, for what purpose?
Questions of the author, Mr. President?
Senator Hagenbu, you yield?
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Hagenbu. So your exchange with Senator Johnson, I think what you guys clarified is that this bill is seeking to expedite the decision of the Medical Advisory Board. Is that what I heard?
No, not expedited. It's saying if someone goes to a medical board and is denied, then they have the opportunity to provide additional information and appeal and get that additional information at least included within a 30-day period, so it could be reconsidered.
Okay. And so how would they get to the medical board? Would they be referred by Texas Department of Public Safety?
The truth is I don't know the details of how they would be referred. I just know that it's possible for them to end up in a situation where a medical board reviewed them, denied, and all I'm asking for is that if that happens, that they have the chance to have due process and provide additional information.
My understanding is the medical board steps in to review a matter at the request of the Texas Department of Public Safety, and these are oftentimes cases where individuals who are suffering from substance abuse or mental disorders are applying for a license to carry, and there's a concern for their ability to safely store and use this, a firearm. And so I'm concerned, does your bill place a cap on the amount of times an individual can appeal a denial from the Medical Advisory Board?
Does it place a cap on the time that they can appeal?
Yeah, if they're denied, does it ever?
My understanding right now is, I think you're right, those are the kinds of reasons that might be denied, which could be decent reasons, but all this is saying is that apparently at this point in time, there's no appeal process. Once the decision's been made, it's done. In this case, they get 30 days to offer additional information.
And so the purpose of this bill is just to shorten the period for the medical board to respond? Is that what it is?
No, it's a process that they can respond. They get a determination. It's unfavorable. They get a chance to say, well, hey, there's maybe some additional information you weren't considering. Let me provide that information, and then the board takes that opportunity to reconsider. Doesn't mean they have to change their mind, but it means that maybe there's some additional information that the person was allowed to at least give them so they could.
Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hagenbu moves suspension of the regular order of business on House Bill 1234. There is objection. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betcourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
25 ayes, 6 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 1234. The Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 1234 relating to certain procedures required for the denial of certain applications for a license to carry a handgun.
Following amendment, Secretary read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Hagenbu.
Senator Hagenbu, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment, as I said, just clarifies one word, adds a word to the phrase medical advisory board, makes changes to a medical advisory board panel. With that, I move adoption.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 1? Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Hagenbu, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage to third reading.
Senator Hagenbu moves passage to third reading. There is objection. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook.
25 ayes and 6 nays. Bill is passed third reading. Senator Hagenbu, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Senator Hagenbu moves suspension of 3A rules. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
25 ayes, 6 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading. Final passage. House Bill 1234. The Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 1234 relating to certain procedures required for the denial of certain applications for a license to carry a handgun.
Senator Hagenbu, you recognized for a motion.
Move final passage.
Senator Hagenbu moves final passage. House Bill 1234. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
25 ayes, 6 nays. Bill is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Middleton, you are recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on House Bill 229.
Mr. President, members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take and consider House Bill 229. House Bill 229 is a very simple and common sense bill. Across the country, we are witnessing the consequences of a radical ideology that seeks to erase the biological reality of sex. And this bill ensures that in Texas law, that there are only two sexes, male and female, and that no amount of political pressure can change that. House Bill 229 restores common sense and scientific clarity to the law. It establishes biological sex not an individual self-proclamation as the standard in Texas government definitions and data collection. Words matter, definitions matter. If we cannot define woman, how can we defend her rights? This legislation ensures that when the law says woman, it means an adult human female. When the law says mother, it means a female parent. These are not subjective terms. They're grounded in truth and biology. This bill is about defending opportunity, fairness, safety, such as the integrity of female-only spaces, as well as accurate services and statistics. HB 229 ensures that public health, criminal justice, and civil rights data reflect that biological reality. And to be clear, HB 229 does not invent anything new. It restores what was universally accepted for millennia, until recently. It ensures that state government recognizes that sex is immutable, objective, and consequential. And these are not political constructs. They're scientific facts. And this bill stands for truth and for common sense. And I move suspension.
Senator Menendez, for what purpose?
Question to the author, Mr. President.
Senator Middleton, do you yield?
I do yield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Middleton. So, Senator Middleton, as I read the bill, I find it interesting. The bill aims to create a different definition of equality when it comes to gender. It says, in the context of biological sex, equal does not mean the same, and separate not inherently mean unequal. And so, as you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I thought the definition of equality was pretty well established through the 14th Amendment, and I know you are an attorney. Can you remind me what the 14th Amendment to the Constitution says?
Right, so you're just referring to the findings here, right?
Correct.
And that's page 2, I believe line 6.
Mm-hmm.
And what that's referring to is, for example, Title IX, right?
Right.
Title IX was created to ensure opportunity for women, right? And we had that bill on the floor last session, the Save Women's Sports Act, which was ensuring the integrity of Title IX, because women were being denied fairness, they're being denied opportunity, they're being denied hard-earned spots on teams, they're being denied scholarships. All of these things were happening because men were unfairly competing against them in college sports, and that's exactly what that refers to.
So the 14th Amendment says the government can't treat similarly situated individuals or groups differently without a valid reason. So it feels like we're laying the groundwork to justify treating women differently. And so I'm just curious, why do you feel we should treat women not unequal, but not the same?
All this bill does is it defines sex and male and female. That's all it does. You're talking about legislative findings right here. And one of the purposes that, let's talk about the HUB program, right, run by the comptroller.
Yeah.
Historically underutilized businesses, right? And one of those categories is woman-owned.
Yep.
So would it be okay for a man pretending to be a woman claiming that woman-owned business category, right?
Right.
I don't think anyone thinks that's okay, Senator.
So earlier in your layout, I think I heard you say you wanted to make sure we could protect women. You talked about women-only spaces, correct?
That was an example.
And so I believe while this is a noble cause, sometimes this could be a double-edged sword where the government might think it appropriate to segregate women from society in certain ways, education, athletics, otherwise, because of the claim of making them more safe. We've also seen governments in other parts of the world use this as a means for control. Preventing women from accessing education, from accessing financial independence, being considered property ownership under the guise of their protection. So my concern sometimes is that we need to prevent Texas from falling on the wrong side of the sword. And I understand that that's not what your bill deals with, but it potentially could lead us in that direction. Are you concerned about that?
No, not at all. By better defining biological sex, we're protecting that example that you just gave.
Okay. So whether this legislation deals with preventing a woman from accessing education, financial independence, property ownership, or any other aspect of society that you and I freely enjoy as men, history has not been on our side. So if this were just about government records, couldn't we have just started the bill at the section with the two definitions similar to most of our legislation? Because I wonder, in this bill, you specifically chose to start by laying out a series of arguments which I fear could provide a legal basis to treat women as a different class of people, which is not a protective way in attempting to protect women in ways we may actually contribute to the erosion of their rights. And so, Senator, I have seen a growing concern of legislation like this that could be used to erase the existence of non-binary and transgender Texans. So why is your bill necessary when agencies already have procedures for collecting sex and gender data?
Well, because there's not always an accurate way to do that. And I'll point out, this is already being done. Executive Order, January 30th, 2025. All Texas agencies must ensure that agency rules, internal policies, employment practices, and other actions comply with the law and biological reality that there are only two sexes, male and female. And so one of the best examples earlier is, what if there is a woman-owned business grant program, right? Is that fair if a man is going to claim that grant and say that he's a woman, and then it's not defined in the law? So what are we to say about that? That's why this is so important. And I'll also point out that we've never had to define this before until what's happening recently. 20 years ago, no one ever thought that a man would compete in women's sports or that a boy would compete in girls' high school sports, which was the Protect Girls Act that we passed in 2021. But it happened, and we had to pass those laws to protect fairness and to protect opportunity and what is fundamentally right.
I can respect the viewpoint, but I do also believe, Senator, that codifying binary-only sex definitions and explicitly excluding non-binary, transgendered, and intersex Texans, in a sense, could be felt by people as a form of state-sponsored discrimination. And so I'm concerned about that. I think if a law forces a non-binary Texans who are real people into categories that don't reflect their lived experiences or identities, then those who uses those categories to decide rights, services, and protections, that would actually become discrimination in practice. And I'm not sure if you're concerned about that outcome. That's a concern that I have. You have any concerns about that?
Well, I'll give you a couple examples of concerns I've got. Family violence shelters. They're dedicated to women sometimes. Would we want a man to be in that, right? That's not a good situation. Is that keeping anyone safe? What if someone has just left a terrible abusive situation, a woman has, and then a man is allowed to enter that family violence shelter? Or a correctional facility. There's tons of sections of our code that say that female inmates, if they're being inspected, they have to be so by a female jailer, right? So there's a lot of situations. Also, foster children, same thing. It has to be, if it's a young girl, it's got to be a female that is in charge of them in a lot of situations.
I think you bring a good example.
We have these correctional facilities are as well. I mean, you certainly wouldn't want a man in a woman's prison unit, right? I mean,
no, not necessarily.
I don't think so.
So one of the concerns that I have, though, is if you had, by definition of what you have here, let's say someone who was born, their birth certificate said they were male, but they've transitioned and they're in every regard, they're a female, they're maybe slight of build, they have, long hair, traditional female qualities, but the birth certificate says they're a male. So by the definition of what you've told us, you think they should go into then a male prison? Would they be safe?
It's their biological sex, and I'll point this out with Department of State Health Services right here. To correct a child's sex due to proven incompletion or inaccuracy, the only two ways that you can. This is in Texas, right here, Department of State Health Services. And it says that a letter from the hospital or a medical facility at birth identifying the error and explaining the correction. Your birth sex is your birth sex, period.
At the end of the day, I believe that our job here is to represent all 31 million Texans. And I mean, obviously, we all know that not all Texans fit neatly into our versions of male and female categories. They could be intersex, they could be non-binary, they could be transgender. And my fear and my concern is the message that we're sending to these young people. I feel that on page 3 of your bill, a female and a woman has the definition of individual whose biological reproductive system is developed to produce ova. Do you recall that in your bill?
Yes, on page 3, it said.
So I'm sure you've heard of the Swyer syndrome, which is a medical condition that does not allow a woman to produce ova. I'm sure you've heard of that in the research that you've done. So then if that happens, are we saying that that woman who has the Swyer syndrome is not a female?
No, because it doesn't say functioning, and also then you go further down, it says sex means an individual's biological sex, either male or female.
Okay, I understand that. So unfortunately, that part where you have the reproductive system developed to produce ova is a very narrow, and many individuals won't fit into that mold. So, Senator, is your intention in this bill to make individuals fit into a mold in which some individuals may be left out, maybe because they're just a little different than others?
The intent is to reflect biological reality.
So I hope you understand that this bill will force individuals to try to accommodate into these boxes that most of us, it's not a problem. For most of us, it's not a problem. But the problem for me is that the million or so people that live in my district don't all fit into neat little boxes. And I don't want them to feel that we're trying to erase who they are. And that's my issue with the bill, but I appreciate you answering my questions.
Thank you.
Senator Cook, for what purpose?
To ask the author questions.
Senator Middleton, do you yield?
I do, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. Okay, so how do you define sex?
So sex is defined as an individual's biological sex, either male or female.
You use the word in your definition. Can you define it without it being circular?
Sure, that is it right there, biological sex, as we have in our code. As we passed in the Save Women's Sports Act, as we passed in the Save Girls Sports Act, and I'll point this out, for our entire history, we never had to define this because common sense dictated we didn't. But unfortunately, that seems to have changed. I think we should all be disturbed by the fact that we're having to define this right now. It's referenced hundreds of times in our code, male and female, man and woman. For our history, hundreds of years, never had to define it. But now we're having to because of these situations that we've had, where boys are trying to compete in girls' sports, where men are trying to compete in women's collegiate athletics, where men are entering the restroom here at the Capitol, where men are wanting to go into women's prison units, where men are wanting to go into family violence shelters that are for women. Those things are happening.
How many occurrences of each of these things in your district has happened in the last year?
I'll give you an example from yours. The HERO ordinance failed. 60% of Houstonians said, no, we don't want men going into women's restrooms.
That's not the question that I asked. With all due respect, Senator, how many CMS stats do you have for this in your LMS, or in your CMS, excuse me?
Common sense. Common sense.
I just want to note for everybody listening, we were unable just now to define sex without using the word sex. That is a poor definition. It's circular. It's not, you're having trouble defining sex because sex is difficult to define. How do you define gender?
So it's biological sex. We're not recognizing gender.
Why would there be two different words if biological sex and gender are the exact same concept?
What's on your birth certificate?
How do you define gender, Senator?
So gender is male and female, which then goes back to biological sex.
Usually you say male and female for sex, you say woman, man, other for gender. So how do you define gender?
Well, we can walk through the bill.
I'd rather not walk through the bill. I've walked through it. I'm asking you how you define. If your kid asked you what was gender, what would you say?
Right. So either you're a boy or a girl, right? If you're a minor, you would say that.
So right now, even on this floor, we are having trouble stating a clear definition of either of these concepts, both of which are really expansive concepts throughout history. So I just want to note this. And does your bill only refer to woman-owned businesses, sports, or is it pretty much defining it in statute blanket across the board?
Those are examples that I gave of why this is important, right? The historically underutilized businesses, which are women-owned. Women-owned business grants, another example. These are things that are in our code right now, which this definition will help protect the original intent, like with Title IX as well. It helps protect the original intent of Title IX. But you're right, it doesn't create a criminal penalty. It doesn't create a civil penalty. It doesn't do anything. Sorry, 1 second here. Yeah, there you go.
So you can define it.
Yeah.
If you want to read it.
Sure. Male and female refers to two sexes based on biological characteristics. So biological sex. And then, of course, the other attributes of it with hormones, chromosomes, sex organs, but the bill doesn't go into that.
As the healthcare professional in the conversation, I would like to offer that sex is defined as a constellation of attributes and characteristics that come together to make sex. Gender, similarly, is a constellation of attributes and characteristics, more abstract, less connected to the physical, and more about the societal expectations, the norms around us. That is also how I would define it. So thank you, Kelly, thank you, Senator Hancock. So do you think that we had to come up with incentives for woman-owned businesses because of our immutable differences?
It was a way to create opportunity. And I think by not defining this, we could be taking away opportunity.
Okay, so creating opportunity because I have immutable differences and I'm not as good of a business owner, and so I need an incentive?
There were reasons why we wanted to promote and set the policy, which is a good policy, to contract with women-owned businesses.
And what do you think that reason was?
If a man is pretending to be a woman, he's going to take that opportunity from a woman.
I'm unaware of that happening. I have no CMS stats.
Well, it may happen without this definition because it's not defined.
But do you think it's because of immutable differences, or do you think it's because of discrimination over the last several centuries that led to fewer women-owned businesses?
Well, with Title IX, it was because of immutable differences, right?
We're not talking about that. I'm asking about women-owned businesses.
It could be both. It could be both. I don't know the reasons in the 1960s when they did that, when they began that with Title VII, right? That's where that began.
I'm sorry, you brought it up, so that's why I thought I'd ask about it. One thing you said was universally accepted for millennia. Where is your citation for that?
We were never confused, and I'll point to this. We have male and female, woman and man throughout our state code, right? It's in there hundreds of times. We never thought we needed to define that until recently. No one ever thought that needed to happen. And we began that mainly with the Save Girls
No one
Sports
ever
Act.
thought?
Well, it didn't happen. Didn't happen.
Okay. So I would ask if you've reviewed, especially since you're carrying this kind of heavy legislation, and we've also had several conversations over the last few weeks about similar topics, I would think you might run through some history. Are you aware that actually ancient Roman law had 3 genders? Male, female, and we don't use this term anymore, but basically hermaphrodite.
Well, they're not 3 genders, and I'll go back a little bit.
I'm sorry, you said universally accepted for millennia, so I was just going to make sure, were you aware that Roman law actually defined 3 genders?
Well, there have never been 3 genders in Texas law. Never.
Well, there was no Texas then.
Never.
But there's no Texas for millennia, so I'm asking you, when you said universally accepted for millennia, were you aware that Roman law actually, in statute, defined 3 genders?
I don't think anyone was confused what a man and a woman was.
Is that a no? You were not aware?
No, I was not aware of that.
Okay, got it. Were you aware that there were people who were two-spirit, multi-gender when we arrived here, when my ancestors, our ancestors arrived here, actually in America?
I had never heard of that, but I've got a good example of not long after that.
Of colonizers killing them off?
No.
Were you aware that in India, the Hijra were also
of why there is a need
non-binary?
for a difference between male and female and to clearly define that.
So I just want to establish that it is not universally accepted for millennia that there is a more expansive understanding of gender. That was not a true statement, in my opinion.
Well, this is a definitions bill. Clearly, we need to do that based on this conversation here.
So, you carried a bill earlier this session about bathrooms and gender, and you stated on the microphone that Odessa had passed an ordinance doing that as well, that had been struck down. You were also not aware of that at the time. Are you aware of any other states that have passed laws similar to this, strictly defining gender as a binary?
Approximately 16 states have passed some version of this, not exactly. Obviously, it depends on each state.
Are you aware that Montana's has already been struck down?
I think Montana's was drafted differently than this.
It's not very much different. SB 458. So were you aware that it had been struck down already, though?
No, Montana's, no. I'm not aware of that case.
Okay. I just want to read a statement and ask what your reaction is from the judge who wrote the district court judge who gave the ruling. Sorry, it's so late. Under SB 458's definitions, female and male, cisgender people, or those whose gender identity conforms with their biological sex assigned at birth, are still protected by Montana's anti-discrimination laws. But those who do not fit squarely into either category, transgender, intersex, two-spirit individuals, are no longer protected, the court said. Put another way, SB 458 now leaves a gap in protection against sex discrimination for individuals whose gender identities do not align with their biological sex. As such, interest would be permitting sex discrimination towards a minority population in violation of the policy of the state of Montana. Have you read any of this, or are you aware of these opinions?
Well, I'll point this out. Since October, the policy of the state of Texas has been you can't change the sex in your driver's license or your birth certificate.
That almost has nothing to do with what I just asked.
That is Governor Abbott's, well, that's Montana, this is Texas. You're talking about Montana anti-discrimination
laws? We have the same federal constitution.
I don't know what those are. I don't know what those laws are you're referring to in Montana, because there's a Montana judge, you said. I don't know if that's state or federal, but their laws are different than ours. And I know in Texas, we've had this since October, and it has not been struck down.
An executive order, which is not law. or it's not a legislated law,
It's
right?
a directive to agencies. It's a directive to agencies. This would be law.
The judge also went on to write, when the legislature thrusts itself into this protected zone of individual privacy, which is one of my highest values, privacy and freedom, under the guise of protecting patients' health, but in reality does so because of prevailing political ideology and the unrelenting pressure from individuals and organizations promoting their own beliefs and values, the state is not only infringing on personal autonomy, again, huge value of mine, it is as well intellectually and morally indefensible. By restricting the definition of sex in a manner which interferes with even that of a doctor and patient's definition, SB 458, the law in Montana, Bell, Montana, prohibits the individualized care and exercise of professional medical judgment, which should be afforded to the individual in violation of the right to privacy. Goes on to say that if you're, basically if you're discriminating against a minority class, it doesn't matter how small that minority class is or how despised by some members of our society that minority class is, they are still protected by our Constitution. And in my opinion, and I assume yours, they are still loved by our God. So how is this bill? How is this bill serving us?
It's defining biological sex, Senator.
So we already
Most
know.
common sense thing that there is. It's sad we're having to do it. It is. We shouldn't have to do this.
We don't have to. You can pull the bill down.
Well, I'm not going to do that. We've had other legislation as well, that didn't pass the House on birth certificates. Obviously, you referred to the Women's Privacy Act. That didn't either.
On April 10th of this year, there we go, you voted yes on Senate Bill 1059 by our dear friend, Senator Tam Parker. That bill said that if a city charter amendment is incongruent with the state constitution, you can't do it. You're not allowed to do it, right? Even if a grassroots group wants to put it together, you can't do it. You voted yes on that bill. So I know that you believe in efficiency of government, that we shouldn't just throw out laws that are unconstitutional. So why, when you look around the landscape, Odessa shut down your bathroom bill, Montana shut down this bill, why are you proposing unconstitutional legislation?
It's definitely not unconstitutional. We're already doing this on birth certificates and driver's licenses in this state. We're already doing it with the Save Women's Sports Act. You have to play sports according to your biological sex. I passed that last session, and there has not been a challenge, and it is law. You know why? Because it's constitutional.
So just because we've been doing something certainly doesn't mean it's constitutional, right? That has to make its way through the court system. And I understand that the talking point is mainly about sports, but this is not about sports. This is very broad and sweeping legislation that erases the existence of anybody that doesn't conform to your definition of gender and sex. Do you agree with that?
It doesn't erase anyone's gender. It doesn't erase anyone's life. It doesn't take away anything from anyone. All this bill does is it defines biological sex. That's all it does.
The judge that struck down SB 458 in Montana said that not only does that bill not quite work for some residents, it completely closes them out of aspects of the state, violating the Equal Protections Clause of the Montana Constitution. It's got some similar stuff in Texas, which guarantees equal treatment to people in the same circumstances. So by declaring as a matter of law that a human being can only be exactly one of two sexes, it explicitly excludes the two plaintiffs in the case from the definition of human beings. Do you want to be on the books as closing out up to 2% of the population from being human beings?
Oh, it's not 2%. This is Department of State Health Services right here. Give you an example, in 2019, 6 out of 377,000 births, that's 0.000158. So they're 99.9984% that this bill clearly defines.
There's a conversation to be had about exactly how to define
These are single
intersex,
digits right here.
depending on which kind of things occur at birth and that
so
sort of
that
thing.
your number's wrong
With all
on
due
the
respect, the
percentages.
smaller the population, Senator, the less we need this bill. Do you agree?
Common sense, and it's the right thing to do.
Is it a super small population or is it a big problem?
Well, defining sex is important. We have people pretending to be the opposite sex. This is a different statistic than people that are pretending to be the opposite sex, and that is happening.
I wish that if you were going to write legislation like this, you'd be prepared for real debate, but Have you heard, I know that Senator Menendez talked about Swyer syndrome. Are you familiar with Turner syndrome?
I've heard of that.
You know what it is?
I believe there's a famous actress that has that.
Oh, I'm actually unaware of that, thank you. It has to do with basically just chromosomal differences. So sometimes an X chromosome and no other chromosome. Based on your bill, how would you define that? Male or female?
Well, that's pretty simple, right here. You have to enter sex on your birth certificate. And if you're ever going to change it, you have to get a letter from a hospital or a medical facility at birth identifying the error made and explaining why the correction is needed.
Is it simple, or did you not answer the question?
Process, that's it. That's the process.
So would somebody with Turner syndrome with one X and nothing else be male or female?
It could be determined by a doctor later.
By a doctor, not by the legislature?
It could be.
Not by a senator?
It could be determined by a doctor.
By a doctor.
And we had that in our birth certificate bill. We had a process for just that situation.
Your bill erases somebody with Turner syndrome. Your bill does not allow a physician to make that determination. What kind of impact will your bill have on that person's life?
This bill has no civil penalties. It has no criminal penalties.
Then why are we voting on it tonight?
It has nothing to do with their licensing requirements that you referred to a second ago. It's only a definition.
You've told me we already have an executive order, astronomically low population, absolutely no enforcement mechanisms. What are we doing spending time on this bill, Senator?
I think it's important for the integrity that we need for biological sex, and make sure that we're preserving safety, we're preserving opportunity, we're preserving fairness.
Do you think it's safe for a trans woman to be in a man's prison?
These are things that we should want for all of our daughters of this state.
Do you think most trans women are safe in men's prisons?
Opportunity.
So Turner syndrome kind of put us up a creek. We didn't have an answer to that one. What about Klinefelter's?
I don't know if I've heard of that one before.
Common genetic condition in which a person has two chromosomes, X and a Y chromosome. So it would be like an XXY. Would that person be male or female under your bill? Because they exist and they matter to me.
They would be designated so on their birth certificate.
Okay, Swyer syndrome. What about congenital adrenal hyperplasia?
Same thing, same answer. Which would also go in their driver's license eventually.
At some point, though, the binary breaks down. There are people who, because of their deeply held beliefs, and we've had a lot of conversations this year about deeply held beliefs, a lot of them. Because sometimes deeply held beliefs, a person's freedom of expression, they might not quite fit into your definition of male and female. Sometimes the way God made them and the way that they're born, they don't fit into your definition. And I don't care if it's 3 people, I don't care if it's 2%, they matter and they deserve not to be erased by your bill. What do you say about your bill's effect on their lives?
No one's being erased.
A district judge in Montana struck down that bill and stated that they were.
Well,
that's a higher opinion than you or me.
In Texas, we no longer allow that. District judges cannot enter those orders anymore. They are not recognized by the state at all.
Are you aware that intersex people around the world have faced much higher rates of infanticide, abandonment, and stigmatization even from their own families? These are babies, these are infants.
There are many, many examples we have here in this building of men pretending to be women that have made actual women, real women, feel unsafe. How's that okay? That's happening right here. Can you imagine how often that's occurring if that's just in this one building right here?
And the actions around bills like your bathroom bill have also made women unsafe, have actually made women be physically harassed and unsafe. Several examples of it that we covered a while back. So do you understand that you may be, by insisting on a gender binary, a sex binary, by insisting that your definition applied to people who may not believe what you believe, who may not experience what you believe, could put them at a higher risk for infanticide, abandonment? Are you concerned about that, Senator?
We're talking about worldwide statistics. This is Texas.
Do worldwide statistics not typically play out in a statistically reasonable way in the state of Texas?
I sure hope there's not infanticide occurring in the great state of Texas.
I would say it's a lot more likely the more we discriminate against the gender and sex of babies. Are you concerned at all about
that? I would love to see the
that?
statistics on infanticide then.
Do you agree that transgender people exist?
All people exist.
I love that answer. Thank you. I guess you've told me one question is that your intent to erase non-binary and two-spirit people, but it sounds like that's not your intent. It's an unintended consequence potentially of your bill.
The bill has no penalties. The bill doesn't make anyone do anything. The bill doesn't prevent anyone from playing sports or being part of a team or signing up for a club that's dedicated to sex, like a women's business organization. It doesn't prevent anyone from doing anything at all. There are no penalties associated with it. It's just common sense definitions.
Doesn't prevent anyone from doing anything, astronomically low population, already have an executive order, don't have any enforcement. I'm just having trouble understanding why we're spending time on this bill. But do you believe that sex should be, back to sex definition, we struggled with that earlier. Do you believe that sex should be defined based on someone's ability to reproduce?
Not necessarily, because you may not have the ability to reproduce.
Totally.
Because you need to make sure that you cover those situations where someone is infertile, of course, where someone can't have children. If you're a male that you're sterile, that doesn't not make you a male. If you're a woman that can't have a baby, that doesn't make you not a woman.
I completely agree. Thank you. How did you arrive at your definitions in the bill?
So, it was very simple. Biological sex and defining the most immutable characteristics, which is reproductive roles. It's the most accurate and meaningful definition of sex because it reflects biological purpose, the biological purpose of sexual differentiation, and the functions across species, of course, are consistent with that.
I'm hearing a little inconsistency right now. You're saying it shouldn't be based on reproduction, but then you're saying immediately after that it is based on
Well,
that.
this is reproduction role. That doesn't mean it's actually happening.
Does it not seem, though, that building this definition could even hurt the feelings of somebody who's not able to reproduce?
If the truth is going to hurt someone's feelings, that's certainly not the legislature's issue.
Ooh, okay. So if someone has ovarian cancer and they have their ovaries removed, could they still be considered a woman or a female under your bill?
Of course. Of course.
I guess I just want to know one more time, because I don't think you answered. How did you arrive at these definitions?
Members, this is not a debatable motion. I've been watching for 20, 25 minutes. You have plenty of time on the floor. This has been called before. No one's called it yet. But the suspension of the regular order of business is not a debatable motion. It's to ask questions about the bill. He's asked those questions about the bill over and over and over. It's not a debatable motion. I want to be polite to you, but it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and we're not going to have a debate on this for the next 2 hours.
Let me ask.
And we have other people who want to also ask questions about the bill.
Okay. I had asked originally how he arrived at the definitions, and I don't feel like he answered. Is it okay if I just ask that one more time?
You may ask it one more time.
Thank you, Mr. President. So how did you derive these definitions? Where'd you get them from?
The House author, of course, wrote them, which I'm very grateful for. She's over here for doing that. But she arrived at that through common sense. That's how biological sex, it's really simple. That's not a hard concept. It's not a trick question. What is woman is not a trick question.
Since you said earlier that sometimes it may come down to a physician needing to be involved in that, do you think it's really fair to say that we only need common sense to write the definition of sex and gender?
So for the 6 out of 377,000, yes, maybe, but that's 0.0001. Sorry, I missed a zero in there. Well, there's one more.
Okay. Well, I don't want to take all of our time up tonight. I want to let other folks ask questions. Deeply, deeply concerned, Senator. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer my questions.
Thank you.
Senator Cook, you're always extremely polite and extremely nice, but it's not a debatable motion, but we gave you plenty of time. Thank you. Senator Johnson, what purpose?
I move to have the discussion between Senator Cook and Senator Middleton reduced to writing and placed in the journal.
That's going to take a really long time for these ladies to do.
I think it's very important, Mr. President.
Well, we can put it to a vote.
We've recorded longer things.
We can put it to a vote. It's up to the members. Senator Johnson's made a motion to put the, yes, Senator West, what purpose?
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, sir, state your inquiry.
Haven't we historically allowed these debates to be placed into the journal? It may very well be after session, but have we not historically allowed this to be placed in the journal?
We have historically done so. It still can be voted on by the members. If you'd wish it to be, it may be months from now.
Well, parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
I've never known us to vote on whether or not we place something in the journal.
There's a first time for everything.
So
But if you want it, put it in the journal, Senator Johnson. It may be months from now. Do not expect it anytime soon. But the reason we can have a motion from time to time and a vote is if every senator wanted to do that on every exchange, that would put a tremendous burden on the staff.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I've never known us to vote. I mean, I understand what's occurring, but normally we wait until after session and put it in the journal. We've never voted whether or not to put something in the journal. We allow that as, I guess, as a matter of privilege to a member. I've never known us to vote.
I just want to be sure that no one ever takes advantage of that and ties up the Senate, because if we follow the rules, that was not a question on the motion to suspend. That was a debate. And if you want to ask for that to be recorded, then I'm going to be stricter in calling in the future all of the questions on a motion to suspend the regular order of business. We allowed that to go on a long time, repetition after repetition. I just want to I don't want to set a precedent here, but if we're going to do that, we can do that. But in the future, I'm going to call it tighter when people stray from a question which is very clear as opposed to a debate.
And I know the hour is very, very late.
Yes.
And the only thing I'm saying, Mr. President, is in the 32 years that I've been here, I've never known a situation where we've put to a vote whether or not to put something in the journal.
You are correct. And there's a first time for everything if it's being abused.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's being abused, but I'm going to start calling the motion to suspend tighter. We've been extremely fair. I think that went on for a half an hour or more.
And I'm not trying to go on for a half hour with this either. So
Pardon?
I'm not trying to go on for a half hour with this, I understand. But I was just wanting to make
I
sure.
will grant this motion, but I'm going to call this very tight for the rest of session, which is only another day.
Rest of the session for the next week.
Which is
Okay.
only another day.
Okay.
All right? But it's a reminder for next session. Is there any objection to that being put in the journal? It will be recorded in the journal. Senator Johnson, do you have a question? All right. Your light was still on. Secretary will call the roll on motion to suspend the regular order of business.
Alvarado, Bettencourt,
20
Birdwell.
ayes and 11 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays on second reading House Bill 229. Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 229 relating to general definitions for and collection of governmental information regarding biological sex.
You're recognized on passage of third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move passage, third reading.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
20 ayes, 11 nays. Bill passes to third reading. You have to hold there. I don't think you'll pick up any additional votes.
Nope.
Members, if I can get everyone's attention, we have a memorial adjournment. Yeah, and members, after this, we are starting a new day. Chair recognizes the Dean of the Senate for a highly privileged motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we adjourn, I yield to Senator Eckhart for memorial recognition.
Senator Eckhart, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and thank you, Dean Zaffarini. Dean Zaffarini and I lost a treasured constituent last night, actually 2 nights ago, as it is nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. It was Ronnie Duggar. He was a treasure of the Texas literati. Ronnie Duggar, at the age of 24, after graduating from the University of Texas, was the very first editor of the Texas Observer. After being the first editor of the Texas Observer, he was the youngest ever editor of Harper's Magazine. He was recruited to be the editor of the Texas Observer by a number of people, including my father. And also my mother's first husband wrote for the Texas Observer, along with a host of other really amazing investigative journalists over the decades. Ronnie was a true lover of Texas, an honest lover of Texas. He loved Texas and celebrated Texas at its best, but he also held Texas accountable at its worst. On the masthead of the Observer, he insisted that it be printed, "We will serve no group or party, but will hew hard to the truth as we find it and the right as we see it." And he made good on that Pledge of Independence. He certainly criticized both parties. He criticized politicians of both parties. He supported politicians of both parties. He wrote a seminal work on LBJ. He also wrote a seminal work on Ronald Reagan. He endorsed Tower back in 1966. He was an early, Senator Hall, he was an early adherent to concerns with regard to electronic voting systems, writing an important piece in 1988 about electronic voting systems. I loved arguing with Ronnie. My father loved arguing with Ronnie. Ronnie's iron sharpened iron. He was made of a kind of metal that we don't often see anymore. He was not at all or ever a loyalist or a blind partisan. He was always, always a curious idealist. And we will miss him. So I thank you for adjourning today in Ronnie Duggar's memory.
Senator Zaffarini.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn until 12:54, Wednesday, May 28th, in memory of Ronald Edward Duggar, constituent of Senator Eckhart.
Any objection? Hearing none. We'll adjourn to 12:54.